She fled pregnant to the mountains to escape a marriage to the wrong man. There are stories that cross time like whispers carried by the mountain wind. Stories of women who dared to defy the destiny imposed upon them, who fled not out of cowardice, but from a courage so profound that only a mother's heart knows. This is one of those stories, about Eleanor, a young woman who carried in her womb not just a life, but a secret capable of destroying everything she knew. In 1877, when the world still measured a woman's worth by the ring she wore and the silence she kept, Nora did the unthinkable. She chose herself. In the coming pages, you will walk alongside her through the suffocating streets of Boston, cross endless plains towards the unknown, feel the biting cold of the Colorado mountains and the warmth of a love born amidst scars. You will meet Caleb, a man broken by grief who learns to love again. You will see how an entire community unites to protect someone the world rejects. This is a story about refuge, but also about roots, about losing everything and discovering that sometimes losing is the only way to find. And you? Where are you watching from at this moment? What land shelters your own dreams and refuges? Before we begin this journey together, I ask that you subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Each gesture from you fuels these stories that I love to share so much. It is you who bring these words to life. Now take a deep breath, close your eyes for a moment, and when you open them, we will be together in year 1877, city, Boston, Massachusetts, United States. The sea-green silk dress, spread over the bed like a frozen lake, seemed to accuse Eleanor O'Connor of all her unconfessed sins. 3 seamstresses had worked on it for weeks, adjusting every pleat, every imported French lace, a dress for a wedding that should never happen. June had arrived in Boston, carrying the dense perfume of magnolias and a humid heat that clung to the skin like remorse. In the O'Connor mansion on Beacon Hill, the windows remained open, but no breeze dared to enter. The air was still thick, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Nora touched the fabric with her fingertips. Cold. Everything in that house was cold despite the summer. The marble walls, the silver chandeliers, her father's eyes when he looked at her, especially when he looked at her. 22 years old. She should be happy. She should be looking forward to her wedding to Robert Ashford, the coal magnate everyone envied, the man her father had chosen as one chooses a horse at auction, by its teeth, its strength, its pedigree. 4 weeks. Just 4 weeks until the golden chains closed around her wrists forever. But there was something that neither her father nor Robert nor all of Boston society knew. Eleanor O'Connor was pregnant. 3 months. 12 weeks of a secret growing inside her like a forbidden flower, beautiful and impossible. The child's father was dead, taken by the typhoid epidemic that had swept through the poor. Neighborhoods of the North End 2 months earlier. Dr. Daniel Doyle. Just thinking his name made Nora's chest tighten as if someone were squeezing, her heart between invisible fingers. Daniel, with hair as dark as the coal Robert sold, but with eyes that shone differently, not with ambition but with kindness. She had met him during the charity work that society ladies did to soothe their consciences. While the other women distributed soups and sermons, keeping kid gloves between their hands and the misery of others, Nora stayed. She watched Daniel work. She saw how he held the hand of a sick child, how he spoke Gaelic with the frightened Irish immigrants, how he smiled. God, how he smiled, even surrounded by so much pain. They hadn't planned to fall in love. Love is never planned when it's true. It happens like rain in the desert, unexpected, urgent, transformative. 3 secret meetings, 3 afternoons stolen from time, hidden within the walls of a small room at the back of the clinic. No words of promise had been spoken, but in his eyes Nora had seen a different future. A future where she wouldn't be just Judge O'Connor's daughter, but simply Eleanor, simply herself. Then the typhoid came, and Daniel was gone without knowing he had left a life growing where there had only been loneliness. A sound of footsteps in the hallway pulled Nora from her thoughts. She moved away from the wedding dress as if it burned, smoothing the loose gown she now wore, carefully chosen to hide the still subtle curve of her belly. "Miss Eleanor?" It was Mary Callahan, the maid, but not just a maid. Mary was Daniel's distant cousin, one of the few people who knew the truth. When she had entered the room weeks ago and found Nora vomiting into a basin for the 3rd morning in a row, she hadn't needed to ask. An Irish woman who had grown up among large families knew how to recognize the signs. "Mary." Nora turned, and something in her eyes made the woman close the door quickly. "Your father is looking for you. He wants to discuss the final wedding preparations." Wedding. The word sounded like a death sentence. Nora walked to the window. Down below, the mansion's garden was perfectly manicured, each bush trimmed into a geometric shape, each flower lined up like soldiers on parade. No plant dared to grow outside its designated place. Such was her father's world, controlled, orderly, with no room for the unexpected. "Mary?" Nora's voice was almost inaudible. "I can't marry him." "I know, dear. I know. He'll find out on the wedding night. A man like Robert Ashford is no fool. And when he finds out," Nora closed her eyes, "he'll destroy me. Not just me, my father. Our entire family. And the baby." She instinctively touched her belly, a gesture she had to suppress every second when she wasn't alone. The baby, Daniel's child, the only piece of him left in this world. "There is a way." Mary moved closer, lowering her voice until it was just a whisper. "Your Uncle Henry, the ranch in Colorado. Henry died 6 months ago, Mary. Yes, and he left the property to you, your inheritance. Your father hasn't taken care of the legal arrangements yet because he was busy with the wedding preparations." Mary pulled a folded envelope from her apron. "This arrived today. From the territorial lawyer, the inheritance papers. The ranch is yours, Miss Eleanor. Legally yours." Nora took the envelope with trembling hands. The paper was rough, different from the fine stationery she was used to. It smelled of distance, of freedom, of possibility. "Colorado is a 6-day train ride," Mary continued, urgent. "You can leave as a widow, a pregnant widow going to meet family out west. No one questions a grieving widow. And when your belly grows during the journey, no one will find it strange. You'll have arrived there before it gets too big to travel. Will your father choose the scandal of a runaway daughter or the scandal of a single pregnant daughter on her wedding day?" Mary held Nora's shoulders. "Eleanor, you can't stay. I've met Robert Ashford. I've seen how he looks at you. Like one looks at a possession, not a person. Men like that, when they discover they've been deceived." She didn't need to finish the sentence, Nora knew. She knew stories of women who had committed indiscretions and were locked away in asylums, declared insane, erased from society as if they had never existed. Robert Ashford had enough power to do that and more. "I have money saved." Nora walked to the wardrobe, moving a loose board at the bottom. There lay her jewels, the ones she had inherited from her mother. Anna O'Connor had died when Nora was 14, leaving only lavender-scented memories in these precious stones. "Can we convert them to cash?" "I know a man at the harbor, discreet." Mary examined the jewels. "They won't fetch their real value, but it will be enough for the ticket and a few months' sustenance." Nora looked around the room. This room where she had grown up, where she had mourned her mother's death, where she had dreamed of a future that would never come. The walls covered in French silk paper, the four-poster bed, the carefully arranged books. Everything she knew was here, and everything she loved was growing silently in her womb. "When?" she asked, and her voice was firmer now. "The train leaves at 4 in the morning from South Station. Tomorrow, no one will see you leave. I'll have traveling clothes ready and everything you'll need. You can't take luggage, just a small bag. You need to look like a modest widow." "And my father?" Mary lowered her eyes. For a moment, the silence was absolute. "Leave a letter. Say you couldn't marry. Don't give details. Let him think you ran away out of fear on a whim for any reason but the true one. It's better that he thinks you're a coward than to know you're—" She stopped, searching for the word. "That I'm a sinner?" Nora completed with a bitter smile. "That's what they'll say. That Judge O'Connor's daughter is a wanton who dishonored her family. What does it matter what they say if you and the baby are alive and free?" Nora placed her hand over her belly again. Inside, so small, still so fragile, was the future. Not the future Boston offered her, of appearances and suffocation, but a real future. Unknown, frightening, but real. "Tomorrow, then." She took a deep breath. Before dawn. That night, Nora dined with her father for the last time. William O'Connor spoke of the ceremony, of the important guests, of how this marriage would solidify the family's position in high society. He spoke of Robert as if describing a bank investment, solid, reliable, profitable. He didn't ask if his daughter was happy. Men like him never did. Happiness was not a negotiable currency in their world. Nora ate in silence, each bite feeling like a stone. She watched her father, his grey hair perfectly combed, his moustache trimmed, his blue eyes that had once been kind before ambition hardened them. He loved her in his own way, she supposed, a way that left no room for her own love. "You're pale, Eleanor." He finally noticed her. "Don't get sick before the wedding." "I'm just tired, Father." "Women." He sighed, returning to his newspaper. Always so sensitive. After dinner, Nora locked herself in her room and wrote the letter. She tore up 3 versions before finding the right words. "Father, I cannot marry Robert Ashford. Forgive me for not having the courage to say this in person. Forgive me for the shame this will cause. But I cannot spend my entire life being someone I am not. I am going to Colorado, to Uncle Henry's ranch. I need time. I need space to breathe. Do not look for me. It is better this way. Respectfully, Eleanor. She didn't mention Daniel. She didn't mention the baby. Some truths were too dangerous to be written. At 3 in the morning, Mary entered the room silently. She carried simple clothes, a grey traveling dress, a black cloak, a veiled hat, a widow's clothes, a new identity folded into the fabric. Elizabeth Bennet. Mary handed her a document. A Quaker widow from Pennsylvania, going to meet her family in Colorado. This is you now. Nora looked at the false name. Elizabeth Bennet. It didn't sound like her, but maybe that was for the best. Eleanor O'Connor had to die so the baby could live. They dressed her in silence, as if preparing a body for a funeral. And it was a funeral in a way. The burial of all she had been. Mary helped her pin her red hair into a tight bun, covering it with the dark hat. Looking in the mirror, Nora barely recognized herself. Good. That was the idea. The money from the jewels. Mary pressed an envelope into her hands. $180. The ticket cost $28. Keep the rest carefully. It will be all you have. Mary, Nora held the maid's hands. Why are you doing this? My father could fire you. Worse. Mary's eyes filled with tears. Because Daniel was my cousin. Because I saw how he looked at you. Because if he were alive, he would have given his life for this baby. She gently touched Nora's belly. This child carries Doyle blood. It deserves to live. And you deserve to be free. They hugged in the dark. 2 Irish women, one by birth, the other by love, conspiring against the world that tried to break them. At 4 in the morning, while Boston still slept, Eleanor O'Connor descended the mansion stairs for the last time. Each step creaked like an accusation. At the door, she paused. She looked back one last time. The wedding dress was still on the bed, a ghost of a future that would never be. Without looking back again, she crossed the threshold and disappeared into the damp pre-dawn mist. Behind her, on the mahogany desk, the letter waited. And when William O'Connor found it a few hours later, the cry he would let out would wake the entire house. But at that moment, walking through the empty streets towards South Station, Eleanor took a deep breath for the first time in months. The train awaited, puffing steam like an impatient dragon, and in her womb the baby, who knew nothing of scandals nor shame nor escapes, continued to grow cell by cell, beat by beat, future by future. The journey into the unknown had begun. And there would be no turning back. The inside of the train car smelled of coal smoke, old sweat, and desperate hope, the scent of people who had no choice but to move forward. Eleanor clutched her small bag to her chest and looked for a free seat, each step measured, each movement calculated not to draw attention. "This way, ma'am." A man in a faded blue uniform pointed to a bench near the window. His eyes scanned her dark dress, the veil, and something in them softened. "My condolences for your loss." Eleanor just nodded, keeping her veil low. A widow. She was a widow now. Elizabeth Bennet, who had lost her husband to pneumonia 3 months ago, 4 months pregnant, traveling to meet her late husband's family in Colorado. The story Mary and she had rehearsed so many times it almost felt true. Almost. The train lurched and began to move, slow at first, then gaining speed. Through the misty window, Eleanor watched Boston disappear. First the familiar streets, then the buildings, then just the grey dawn fog. She touched the glass with her fingers, as if she could hold on to that last image of the city that had been her entire world. But it was too late. Boston was already in the past. "Going far, ma'am?" Eleanor turned. Beside her, a robust woman with red cheeks smiled shyly. She had a thick German accent and held a small child in her lap, a girl of perhaps 2 with blonde braids and enormous eyes. "Colorado." Eleanor kept her voice low, almost a whisper. A widow's voice should be like that, she thought. Small, broken. "And you?" "Omaha. My husband works on the railroads. This is Greta." She gently jiggled the girl. "And those are Carl and Friedrich." She pointed to 2 boys fighting 2 seats ahead, both with tousled, straw-colored hair. "A beautiful family." The words came out automatically but held truth. There was something about the solidity of this woman, the way she held her daughter, that made Eleanor's chest ache with envy. "And you travel alone?" The German woman tilted her head, curious but not intrusive. "It's a long way for a lady in your condition." Eleanor followed the woman's gaze to her own belly. She wasn't obviously pregnant yet, but to trained eyes, a mother's eyes, there were signs. The way she had protected her abdomen when she sat, her pallor, the air of fragility. "My late husband's family." Eleanor touched the wedding ring Mary had given her, a simple gold band bought at a pawn shop. "We promised his mother the child would be born there." Lie upon lie, building a house of cards. But what choice was there? The German woman nodded with compassion. Then you understand. She hugged Greta to her chest. Family is everything, yes. Especially for the little ones. The train passed through Springfield, then Albany, cities Eleanor knew only by name, becoming briefly real through the window, before disappearing again. The landscape began to change. Fewer buildings, more trees, open fields stretching as far as the eye could see. On the second day, they crossed New York State. Eleanor spent most of the time looking out the window, watching the world slide by like pages of a book she had never read. Small farms dotted the land like dollhouses. Children waved at the train from flowery fields. America was so vast, so impossible to comprehend. At night, when she tried to sleep on the uncomfortable seat, the sickness came. Nausea rose in her throat like a tide, and Eleanor had to press her lips together to keep from vomiting right there. The German woman, who seemed never to sleep, noticed. Ginger. She held out a piece of dried root. Chew it slowly. It helps with the morning sickness. Good for the baby, too. Eleanor took the root gratefully. It tasted strong, almost fiery, but it did indeed calm her stomach. They sat in silence. Two strangers united by that secret knowledge only women share, the silent language of pregnancy, of a body that is no longer entirely one's own. In Buffalo, more passengers boarded. A Methodist reverend with a white beard sat across the aisle. He had kind eyes and ink-stained hands, hands that wrote sermons, Eleanor imagined. He greeted her with discreet courtesy, respecting her apparent mourning, but there was warmth in the gesture. On the third day they reached Chicago. The city was a whirlwind of smoke and noise, so different from the restrained elegance of Boston that Eleanor almost didn't recognize it as civilization. Stockyards and factories spewed dark clouds into the sky. The smell of meat and metal permeated even the inside of the train. They stopped for 4 hours. Eleanor descended to the platform on wobbly legs, desperately needing to stretch her back, which ached from the hard seat. The train station was pure chaos, immigrants arriving from all directions, vendors shouting in languages she didn't understand, children crying. "Careful, ma'am." The Reverend appeared at her side, offering his arm. "Chicago is generous to thieves and cruel to widows." Eleanor accepted his support gratefully. They walked to a small cafe where she ate for the first time in 24 hours, simple bread and weak tea that tasted like victory. "Going far?" the Reverend asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Colorado. Family ranch." "Ah," he nodded, understanding something unsaid. "The West. Land of new beginnings. Fitting." Eleanor looked at him, trying to decipher if there was a veiled accusation in his words. But his eyes remained kind, without judgment. Perhaps there were men of God who actually practiced compassion instead of just preaching it. "Is it hard?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself. "To start over?" The Reverend smiled, and for the first time she noticed the deep sadness that inhabited his face like a permanent shadow. "It is the hardest thing in the world, my child, and the only one worth doing." He looked out the cafe window, at some distant point perhaps only he could see. "We lose who we were, but we find who we can be, and sometimes who we can be is much better than who we were forced to be." Simple words. But Eleanor held them in her heart like a talisman. The train left Chicago at dusk, carrying them through Illinois, then Iowa. The land became flatter, emptier, more honest. There was nothing to hide on the plains, only sky and earth eternally confronting each other. Eleanor found it comforting. She was tired of hiding. On the fourth day they crossed the Missouri River. The river was as wide as a promise, as muddy as the truth. On the other side was Nebraska, and beyond that, all that was left of the journey. "You're not going back east, are you?" the German woman asked softly, cradling a sleeping Greta. Eleanor shook her head. No, there was no going back. Even if she wanted to, there was no way back. "Me neither," the woman smiled sadly. "I left everything in Germany. Family, friends, my mother. I came because Heinrich said America was the land of opportunity." She laughed quietly. "He didn't say that opportunity sometimes looks like fear, but was it worth it?" The woman looked at her children, Greta sleeping in her lap, the boys finally quiet in the seat in front, drawing pictures on the fogged glass. "Ask me again in a few years." But her eyes said yes, that it was already worth it. In Omaha, the German family got off. The woman hugged Eleanor briefly, squeezing her hands. "Be strong, Frau Bennett. For the baby." She looked meaningfully at Eleanor's belly, which was now beginning to round even under the loose dress. "The love we feel for them makes us stronger than we thought possible." Then they were gone, a complete family disappearing into the platform crowd, and Eleanor suddenly felt alone, in a way she hadn't before. Until that moment she had shared the journey. Now it was just her and the unknown. The train continued west, Wyoming. Land the government had taken from the natives and now sold to settlers, as if one could own the sky. Eleanor watched out the window as the mountains began to appear on the horizon, first as distant blue shadows, then as a presence impossible to ignore, the Rockies. On the 6th day, they reached Cheyenne. Eleanor was exhausted in a way that went beyond the physical. Every bone ached. Every muscle protested, and inside her the baby, now 4 months along, was making its presence known. Small, almost imperceptible flutters, life insisting on existing. The last stretch to Denver seemed to last forever. The mountains surrounded the train like stone giants, indifferent to the small humans crossing their shadows. Eleanor pressed her hand against the cold window. There, somewhere among those peaks was Timber Creek, was her Uncle Henry's ranch, was her future, or her ruin. The Reverend, who had remained for the entire journey, approached her before getting off in a small town whose name Eleanor didn't even register. "May God bless you, Mrs. Bennet." He placed a small Bible in her hands. "And remember, He does not give us burdens we cannot bear. He only gives us reasons to be stronger than we thought we were." Eleanor held the book, feeling its weight. She wasn't religious, not in the way Boston society demanded, full of appearances and judgments. But there was comfort in the gesture. There was kindness. "Thank you." Her voice came out hoarse from days of not truly using it. "For everything." He just smiled and got off, disappearing into his own story, leaving Eleanor to continue hers. On the morning of the 7th day, the train finally arrived in Denver. Eleanor stepped onto the platform with trembling legs, clutching her bag as if it contained everything precious in the world, which, in a way, it did. The $152 that remained, the ranch documents, her uncle's letter, written months before he died, saying she would always have a home in Colorado. "Come whenever you want, niece. These mountains have room for dreams that Boston never allowed." Henry O'Connor didn't know how prophetic his words would be. From Denver, another journey, shorter by stagecoach this time, to Silver Creek. 2 hours of jolting on dirt roads that were more like dry riverbeds. Every bump threatened to dislodge the little Eleanor had eaten. She closed her eyes, breathed through her mouth, and pressed her hands over her belly. "Hold on," she thought, speaking to the baby. "Hold on, we're almost there." When Silver Creek finally appeared on the horizon, Eleanor almost cried with relief. It wasn't a town. It was barely a cluster of wooden buildings, more promise than reality. A main street of packed dirt, a general store, a saloon, a small white wooden church that looked ashamed to be there. And at the station, a single man was waiting. Tall, broad-shouldered, a wide-brimmed hat hiding half his face, work pants stained with dirt, and his eyes, even from a distance Eleanor saw his eyes, grey as river stones, watching the stagecoach arrive with an intensity that was almost frightening. The stagecoach stopped. The driver got down, helped Eleanor with her small bag. "Silver Creek, ma'am." End of the line. The tall man approached, and Eleanor then saw the scar, deep, jagged, running from his left shoulder to his chest, visible where his shirt opened at the neck, the mark of something terrible, something that left scars that would never completely fade. "Mrs. Bennet?" His voice was like rock grinding on rock. It carried an accent Eleanor couldn't immediately identify. Scottish, perhaps. "I'm Caleb Mackenzie. I looked after Henry O'Connor's ranch." A pause. "I'm sorry for your loss." Eleanor blinked, confused for a moment. Then she realized he was talking about her uncle, not her fictional husband. Of course. To the world, she was a widow seeking sanctuary with family. "Mr. Mackenzie." She extended her hand, formal as she had been taught. "Thank you for coming to get me." He looked at her outstretched hand for a long moment, as if he didn't know what to do with it. Then he shook it briefly, a calloused, strong, warm palm against her cold skin. "Silver Creek is 90 minutes from here." He indicated an old wagon pulled by 2 horses. "It's not a comfortable ride, but the horses know the way." He helped her up with a care that surprised Eleanor. For a man who seemed made of stone and silence, there was a surprising gentleness in his hands. He didn't ask about her non-existent luggage. He didn't ask why a supposed widow would arrive in Colorado with nothing but a small bag. He just helped her get settled, covered her legs with a wool blanket, and took the reins. As they left Silver Creek behind, Eleanor finally allowed the tears to come, silent, streaming down her face without a sound. 6 days of travel. 6 days pretending to be someone she wasn't. 6 days holding fear in her chest like a stone. But now, with the immense Colorado sky above her head and mountains guarding the horizon like stone sentinels, something in Eleanor's chest began, for the first time since she discovered she was pregnant, to feel almost like hope. The mountain refuge awaited her, and with it, everything she didn't yet know she needed. The path to the ranch wound between cliffs and pines so old they seemed to hold secrets from before any man dared call those lands his own. Eleanor held onto the side of the wagon as the wheels found every rock, every hole, every irregularity in the terrain, as if the very ground resisted human presence. Caleb Mackenzie did not speak. He drove the horses with steady hands, his eyes fixed on the path ahead, his silence as dense as the mountain air. Eleanor watched him from the corner of her eye, the hard profile, the clenched jaw, that scar telling stories he clearly didn't offer. There was a weight to this man, not just in the strong muscles of his shoulders or his calloused hands, but a soul-deep weight, the weight of one who carries ghosts. The ranch. Eleanor finally broke the silence, her voice sounding strange after so long being quiet. Is it in good condition? Caleb took so long to answer, she thought he might not have heard her. Then your uncle was a good man, cared for the land. The land cares for those who respect it. It wasn't exactly an answer, but Eleanor understood the meaning. Henry had been respected, and Caleb, by the tone of it, had respected Henry back. Have you lived here long? 6 years. A long pause filled with unspoken things. Came with my wife, she... His voice faltered for an instant, so brief it almost went unnoticed. But Eleanor heard it. She died. And my son. The words fell between them like stones into a deep well, sending out ripples of silence. Eleanor didn't know what to say. Apologies seemed too empty, curiosity too improper. I'm sorry. It was all she could manage, simple and true. Caleb just nodded, and the silence returned. But it was a different silence now, not hostile but shared. The silence of people who know loss and don't need to disguise it with useless words. When the ranch finally appeared on the horizon, the sun was already beginning to set, painting the mountains in gold and crimson. Timber Creek wasn't large, a main wooden house with a porch running along the front, a faded red barn, a few smaller buildings scattered about, all simple, practical, honest in a way Boston mansions never were. But there was something more. A garden beside the house, wild but intentional, with flowers Eleanor didn't recognize growing among aromatic herbs. A small wooden fence protecting what looked like a vegetable patch. And beyond, far beyond, the open fields where cattle grazed peacefully, blue mountains forming an infinite wall on the horizon. It was beautiful, with a raw, unadorned beauty, a beauty that didn't ask permission to exist. Timber Creek. Caleb stopped the wagon in front of the house. Yours now. Yours. The word sounded strange. Eleanor had owned many things in Boston. Dresses, jewels, a reputation, but she had never felt that anything was truly hers. Everything had invisible strings attached to expectations, to judgments, to control. But this simple house under an impossibly big sky, this could be hers. Hers and no one else's. A man appeared from the house, black, tall, with a military posture that remained even in civilian clothes. He must have been in his early 30s, his face marked by sun and wind, but with eyes that shone with sharp intelligence. Mrs. Bennet. He inclined his head respectfully. Isaiah Carter, but everyone calls me Zeke. I've been helping Caleb with the ranch since Henry died. Mr. Carter. Eleanor accepted his outstretched hand. Firm, calloused, just like Caleb's, the hands of honest work. We've prepared a room for you. Zeke took her bag with care as if it contained crystal. Figured you'd be tired from the journey. Tired didn't begin to describe it. Eleanor felt the weight of the past weeks crash down on her all at once. The discovery of the pregnancy, planning the escape, the 7 days on the train, the constant fear of being discovered. Her legs almost gave way. Caleb was at her side in an instant, a firm hand on her elbow. Easy now. His voice was gruff but not unkind. Slowly, they helped her inside. The house smelled of pine and something aromatic Eleanor didn't immediately identify. Inside, everything was simple but clean. Exposed wood on the walls, a stone fireplace dominating the living room, few but solid pieces of furniture. And flowers, dried flowers hanging from the beams, fresh flowers in makeshift vases. A feminine presence even in its absence. My wife, Caleb followed Eleanor's gaze. Morning star, she planted the garden. Taught traditional medicine, healing herbs. He gently touched one of the dried flowers as if touching a memory. Zeke and I tried to keep it as she liked. Eleanor felt something tighten in her chest. This man, hard as the mountains that surrounded him, maintained his dead wife's garden. There was poetry in that. There was love beyond death. Oh, it's beautiful. She touched one of the dried flowers, too, feeling the fragile petals. She had good taste. She had kindness. Caleb corrected softly. Kindness is rarer than taste. They led Eleanor to the room at the back of the house. It was small, but with a large window overlooking the mountains. A simple bed covered with a patchwork quilt, a nightstand with a lamp, a wooden chair by the window, and on the table a small vase with fresh wildflowers. Zeke! Eleanor realized who had arranged it. Thank you. He just smiled a little shyly. Good night, Mrs. Bennet. If you need anything, we're in the barn. Caleb's been sleeping there since Henry died. We thought it best to keep the house for you. That's not necessary, It is. Caleb interrupted, firm but not rude. A lady needs her privacy, her rest. These mountains aren't kind to those who arrive weak. His eyes swept over Eleanor's pale face, her trembling hands. He knew she was weaker than she let on. Tomorrow we'll talk about the ranch, about what you need to know. Tonight, sleep. They left, closing the door softly behind them. Eleanor was alone for the first time in over a week. Truly alone, not surrounded by strangers on a train, not hiding behind a false identity. Just her, the simple room, and the silence of the mountains. She walked to the window. Outside, the sky exploded in color as the sun descended behind the peaks. Pink, orange, purple, gold, the entire divine palette spread out like a promise. She had never seen a sky like this in Boston. There even the sky seemed restrained, orderly, controlled by buildings that blocked the horizon. But here the sky was infinite, frightening in its vastness but honest. It hid nothing. Eleanor placed her hands over her belly, feeling the small curve that grew day by day. We're here, she whispered to the baby. We're home. She slept soundly that night, for the first time since she'd learned she was pregnant, without dreaming of scandal or shame. She dreamt instead of mountains that touched the sky, and gardens of flowers that never completely died. The following days passed in a haze of adaptation. Eleanor woke with the sun, not because she chose to, but because her body no longer gave her a choice. Morning sickness came with cruel predictability. Zeke, she discovered, was a surprisingly good cook and prepared ginger tea that soothed her stomach. He never asked why. He just left the steaming mug on the porch every morning. Caleb taught her about the ranch in silences, punctuated by economical words. He showed her where the well was, how to feed the chickens, where the firewood was stored. He never got too close, always maintaining a respectful distance. But his eyes, those grey eyes like a contained storm, missed nothing. They noticed when she grew too pale, when her hands trembled, when she needed to sit more often than she admitted. "Are you ill, ma'am?" he asked on the third day, direct as a bullet. Eleanor nearly choked on her tea. "No, just—" The journey was long. "I'm still recovering." He studied her for a long moment as if he could read truths written beneath her skin. Then he just nodded. "These mountains heal. Give it time." But she saw doubt in his eyes. Caleb Mackenzie was no fool. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know what. On the fifth day, a letter arrived from Boston. It had been forwarded from the territorial lawyer. Eleanor recognized the handwriting immediately, her father's. Her hands trembled so much she almost dropped the envelope. "Bad news?" Zeke appeared with a bucket of water, watching her carefully. "I don't know." Eleanor tore the seal, unfolded the paper. "Eleanor, you have destroyed this family. Robert Ashford has publicly broken the engagement, claiming I am incapable of controlling my own daughter. Society laughs at us. Your name is a joke. I know you are in Colorado. Stay there. We no longer have a daughter. William O'Connor." The words were cold, sharp as glass. But instead of pain, Eleanor felt something unexpected. Relief. Her father had disowned her, cut ties. She no longer had to fear they would find her, force her to return. She was truly free. "Ma'am?" Zeke's voice brought Eleanor back. "Nothing important." She folded the letter, put it in her pocket. "Just the past saying goodbye." Zeke nodded, understanding something unsaid. To a former Buffalo soldier, he too knew about cutting ties with pasts that no longer served. The past has a habit of not letting go easily, he observed, looking at the mountains. But these lands teach that every dawn is a chance to start over. Be who you want to be, Mrs. Bennet. Here no one cares who you were, only who you are. Simple words. But they carried a truth that Boston had never offered. That night, Eleanor dined with Caleb and Zeke for the first time. Until then she had eaten alone in her room, still hiding, still afraid. But something in her father's letter, in the definitive coldness of those words, had broken the last chain. They sat at the simple wooden table, Eleanor, Caleb, Zeke. The food was basic but good. Beef stew, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden. They ate in comfortable silence. The only sounds, the clatter of cutlery and the wind in the trees outside. "I want to learn," Eleanor finally spoke, surprising all three of them. "About the ranch. About everything." "I didn't come here to be useless." Caleb looked up, assessing her. "The land is hard. The work is heavy. Ma'am, you're not—" He hesitated, searching for words. "In a condition for heavy labor. I can learn other things, accounting, business. Your Uncle Henry must have had records." "He did," Zeke intervened. "But they're a mess. Henry was a good rancher, but terrible with numbers. The books are a disaster. You could help a lot by organizing them." Caleb thought for a moment, then nodded. All right, but no physical exertion. And if you feel unwell, you stop immediately. It was an order. But it was an order born of genuine concern, not control. Eleanor accepted. That night, alone in her room, Eleanor took out her father's letter and read it again. Then calmly, she burned it in the lamp. She watched the words turn to ash, freeing herself with the smoke. Tomorrow she would start organizing the ranch's books. She would start making herself useful. Start building a life here. And maybe, just maybe, she would find a way to confess the truth to Caleb before her belly grew too big to hide. But that confession would have to wait, because some secrets need time before they can be revealed. And time in the mountains moved differently, slower, deeper, like rivers beneath the earth. July slipped into August and August into September. Eleanor woke to the sun painting the mountains gold, spent her days organizing Henry's chaotic records, and fell asleep to the sound of the wind whispering through the pines. Life on the ranch had its own rhythm, dictated not by grandfather clocks or social engagements, but by the movement of the sun, the needs of the animals, the cycles of the land. She was, for the first time in her life, happy in a way she hadn't known was possible. But the lie grew with the same constancy as the child in her womb. 5 months now. Soon it would be impossible to hide. Eleanor wore increasingly loose dresses, constant shawls even as the heat waned. She avoided physical proximity. When Caleb or Zeke got too close, she'd find an excuse to move away. During meals, she always sat sideways. She faked backaches so she wouldn't have to bend over. She was building a fortress of small lies around a truth too large to confess. Caleb noticed. Of course he did. His eyes, a grey storm always watching, missed every hesitation, every overly calculated move, every flimsy excuse. But he didn't ask. He respected Eleanor's privacy, with a chivalrous distance that was both a relief and a frustration. Zeke was more direct. "You're pregnant," he said it one September morning without preamble, as he helped Eleanor with the account books. Eleanor felt the world shudder. She gripped the edge of the table. I'm not blind, Mrs. Bennet." He continued writing numbers, his voice as calm as if discussing the weather. "I know a woman expecting a child when I see one. The question is, does Caleb know?" "No." Eleanor's voice came out small. "No one is supposed to know, but I do." Zeke finally looked at her, and there was unexpected kindness in his gaze. "And I don't judge. Everyone carries the weight they can. But it's going to get harder to hide. Frankly, it already is. Please." Eleanor felt tears coming, the damn tears that came so easily now. Hormones, she knew, but she couldn't control them. "Don't tell him, not yet. I need more time." "Time for what?" "For the truth to magically disappear." But there was no cruelty in his voice, just pragmatism. "Mrs. Bennet, whoever you really are." He saw how she flinched. "Yes, I don't believe you're a widow either. Real widows carry their grief differently. Yours looks more like relief than sorrow." Eleanor covered her face with her hands. All that pretense, all those careful lies, and a former soldier who barely knew her, saw right through it all. "My real name is Eleanor O'Connor," she confessed, her voice muffled by her palms. "From Boston. The baby. The father died before he knew about the pregnancy. I ran away from an arranged marriage, from a scandal that would destroy my family. I came here because I had nowhere else to go." Silence. Long, heavy, impossible to bear. Then Zeke sighed deeply. "Boston," he repeated as if tasting the word. "Big city, demanding society. I understand." He pushed paper and ink towards her. "You need to tell Caleb. He deserves the truth, and you need help that can only come if he knows. He'll kick me out. He'll hate me for lying." "Maybe," Zeke admitted honestly. "But Caleb Mackenzie is a good man. Stern, yes. Closed off always, but good to the bone. Give him the chance to choose to help you. He'll surprise you." But Eleanor wasn't ready, not yet. She bought 2 more weeks of silence with vague promises of telling him soon. Zeke accepted reluctantly, but with one condition. If she didn't tell him by the end of September, he would. It was an ultimatum, but it was a fair one. The 3rd week of September, Eleanor went down to the vegetable garden to pick carrots. Simple work, no heavy physical effort. She knelt carefully, always protecting her belly, and began to loosen the earth around the roots. That's when it happened. A sudden violent dizziness that made the world tilt. Eleanor tried to stand up too quickly. She slipped. She fell sideways, instinctively protecting her abdomen with her arms. But the fall was hard. The pain was immediate, a sharp jab in her lower belly that made her double over and groan. "Mrs. Bennet!" Caleb appeared out of nowhere, running from the barn. He knelt beside her, his hands already helping her to sit up. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I just slipped." Eleanor held her belly, her face contorted in pain. I'm fine. I just need... And then she realized Caleb's hands were on her shoulders, helping her to her feet. And when he lifted her, when he pulled her against his chest to support her, her body pressed against his, Caleb froze, completely still. Eleanor felt the exact moment he understood, felt him process the different shape of her body, the impossible-to-deny curve between them, saw the comprehension cross his face like lightning before a storm. He pushed her away, holding her by the shoulders, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that burned. "Oh, you're pregnant." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an accusation, perhaps. Eleanor felt her whole world crumble. All the careful lies, all the evasions, the entire fragile construction she had maintained for months, all of it collapsing in seconds. "Caleb, Tears started to fall, hot, uncontrollable. "I can explain." "How long?" His voice was hard as rock. "How long have you been like?" 5 months. When I arrived, I was already 3 months along. 5. He stepped back, running his hands through his hair, trying to process. 5 months, and you said nothing. You worked, you exerted yourself, and you said nothing? I was afraid. Eleanor sobbed, all her composure shattered. Afraid you'd kick me out, that you'd judge me, that you'd be like everyone else. Like everyone else? Caleb turned on her, and there was hurt in his eyes now, not just anger. What do you think I'm like? Like those men in Boston who would force you to marry for reputation? Like those who would abandon a pregnant woman without a husband? I don't know what you are, Eleanor shouted back, all the tension of months exploding. I don't know you. How could I trust you? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds stopped singing. Caleb closed his eyes, took 3 deep breaths. When he opened them again, something had changed in them. The anger was gone, replaced by something more complex. Weariness, perhaps, or understanding. The father? He asked quietly. Dead before he knew, a doctor. A good man. Eleanor wiped her face with the back of her hand. I loved him, but we couldn't marry. And when I found out about the baby, he was already gone. Caleb nodded slowly. He walked to the garden fence, leaned against it and looked at the mountains as if seeking answers there. Is Elizabeth Bennet false? He asked, without looking at her. Yes, Eleanor O'Connor. My Uncle Henry was my father's brother. He left the ranch to me. I ran from an arranged marriage because I knew my fiancé would discover the pregnancy and... Her voice broke. Men like him destroy women like me, and babies like mine. More silence, long, torturous. Does Zeke know? Caleb finally asked. For 2 weeks. He said I should tell you that you deserve the truth. But I was too afraid. You were afraid, Caleb repeated, tasting the words. He turned to her then, and Eleanor saw tears in his eyes, the first and only exposed emotion she had seen from him since they met. Did you know Morningstar was pregnant when she was killed? His voice cracked. Did you know our second child died with her? Eleanor felt the world stop. Caleb had never spoken of this, never mentioned that he had lost not just a wife and a son, but an unborn child as well. No, I didn't know, she whispered. I am so sorry, Caleb, so sorry. He wiped his eyes quickly, ashamed to have shown weakness. Come. He extended a hand to Eleanor, helping her to her feet completely. You need to rest, and I need to think. He took her back to the house, helped her sit on the porch, brought her cold water, made sure she was all right. Then he left without a word, walking towards the mountains, a solitary figure against the vastness of stone and sky. Zeke appeared moments later, watching Caleb leave. Does he know? He asked simply. Eleanor just nodded. And? I don't know. She watched Caleb disappear among the trees. I don't know if he hates me or if he just needs time. I don't know anything anymore. Give him the night. Zeke sat beside her. Caleb processes things alone. It's always been his way. But he'll come back. And when he does, he'll have decided. What? Decided what? Whether he's going to help you or not. Whether he'll let you stay or ask you to leave. Zeke looked at her directly. But Eleanor, he used her real name, bet on him choosing to help. Because that's who he is. That night, Eleanor waited. Caleb didn't come back for dinner. He didn't come back when the sun went down. He didn't come back when the stars lit up the sky like infinite candles. She slept poorly, listening to every sound, waiting for footsteps that didn't come. Only when the sun began to paint the horizon pink did Eleanor hear the barn door open. She ran to the window, saw Caleb walking slowly to the house carrying something. He knocked on the door. Eleanor opened it, her heart beating so hard it hurt. Caleb stood there holding a wooden chair, small, clearly handcrafted during the night. A rocking chair, a chair for rocking a baby. I made this for Benjamin, he said quietly, his eyes red from a sleepless night. For my son. I never used it. I kept it in the barn for 2 years, unable to even look at it. He held the chair out to Eleanor. "But your baby will need it." "And his voice grew hoarse. "I can't save Morningstar. I can't bring Benjamin back. But I can help keep you and your child safe, if you'll let me." Eleanor looked at the chair, at this broken man offering the only piece left of his dead son, and she understood not just the gesture, but its weight. The conscious choice to turn pain into protection, loss into love. "Caleb," her voice came out strangled. "Why? Why would you help someone who lied to you?" He met her eyes, and there was a strange peace in his gaze now. "Because you lied out of fear, not malice. Because you're alone and scared and carrying a life you didn't ask for help to create. Because—" he hesitated, as if the next words cost him everything. "Because Morningstar came to me in a dream last night. First time in 2 years, she said, to protect the woman from the East who carries a child alone. She said that love doesn't end, it just transforms. That I can love again without betraying her." Tears were streaming down Eleanor's face now, silent and warm. "You don't have to love me. I just need safety. For the baby." "I know." Caleb placed the chair gently on the floor. "And you'll have it. We'll make an official story. You're a real widow. You arrived pregnant looking for your uncle's family. When the baby is born, it will be a Mackenzie. No one will question it. And whoever dares—" his eyes hardened. "They'll have to go through me first. And when my past catches up, when my father or my fiancé look for me, then we'll deal with it. Together, you, me, Zeke." He offered his hand. "But you have to trust me now. Complete truth. No more lies." Eleanor looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath and took it. Eleanor O'Connor, 22, from Boston. Judge's daughter. Runaway from an arranged marriage to a coal magnate named Robert Ashford. 5 months pregnant by an Irish doctor named Daniel Doyle, who died of typhoid without knowing he'd be a father. All the words came out in a rush. And absolutely terrified of the future. Caleb squeezed her hand. Caleb Mackenzie, 28, from a Scottish farm that no longer exists. Widower of an Arapaho woman named Morningstar. Father of a dead son named Benjamin. I carry a scar from a mining accident that almost killed me. He smiled sadly. And also absolutely terrified of the future, but less terrified knowing I'm not facing it alone anymore. And there in the dawning mountain morning, between painful truths and silent promises, something new began. Not love yet, too soon for that, but trust. And sometimes trust is a stronger foundation than love could ever be. October arrived, painting the mountains in impossible shades of red and gold. The air grew sharp, bringing the promise of snow on the highest peaks. Eleanor entered her 6th month of pregnancy, and now that the truth was out, she stopped hiding. She wore maternity dresses that Zeke had brought from town, simple, practical, honest in their function. Caleb treated her with an almost reverential care. He didn't touch her without permission. He didn't get too close. But he was always there, a protective shadow that came between her and any physical exertion. He carried firewood for her. He reached for items on high shelves. He made sure she ate enough. It was strange to be protected without being controlled. In Boston, men protected women as they protected valuable possessions, with jealousy, with restriction, with golden chains. Caleb protected her as one protects something wild and precious, staying close but without trying to tame. Eleanor found that she liked it, more than she should perhaps. One October afternoon, a visitor arrived. Eleanor was on the porch, sewing a small baby blanket with fabric she had found in Morningstar's chests. Caleb had said she could use anything of his late wife's. She would have liked that. She wasted nothing, especially love. She heard horses before she saw them, 3 riders. Zeke came out of the barn immediately, a rifle held casually but present in his hand. Caleb appeared from somewhere, placing himself between the visitors and Eleanor, but when the riders became clear, Caleb relaxed. One was an older white man, with a serious but kind expression. The other 2 were natives, a young man of perhaps 20 and an elder woman. "Caleb?" The older man dismounted. "Zeke." "Bradford." Caleb shook his hand. "Grandmother Rain, Running Wolf." He nodded to the others. The man looked at Eleanor with curiosity. "This must be Eleanor O'Connor. I heard you arrived from Boston." Eleanor blinked. How did he know her real name? Caleb noticed her confusion. "Eleanor, this is Judge William Bradford, territorial. He's a friend." The word came out with weight. "And an ally." "An ally?" Eleanor stood up slowly, instinctively protecting her belly. Bradford smiled kindly. "Mrs. O'Connor, since we're being honest, I know who you are. I know where you ran from. And I know why." He raised a hand as she opened her mouth in panic. "I know because Caleb told me. And Caleb told me because he trusts me. As he should. I've come to help." Eleanor looked at Caleb, who nodded in confirmation. "Bradford has been helping us for years. With papers. With legal protection, Zeke explained. With many things we can't do alone. The older woman, Grandmother Rain, dismounted with the help of Running Wolf. She was small, wrinkled like the bark of an ancient tree, but with eyes that shone with sharp intelligence. She walked directly to Eleanor without hesitation. She touched Eleanor's belly with hands as light as leaves. "Girl," she said in heavily accented English. "Strong, a fighter like her mother." She looked at Eleanor. "You carry more than a baby. You carry fear, too. You must let the fear go." "The baby feels it." Eleanor felt tears well up. There was authority in that voice, but also a compassion she had never expected from a stranger. "How can I not be afraid? I'm alone on the run with no idea what to do." "You are not alone." Grandmother Rain gestured to Caleb and Zeke. "You have family. Family does not need blood. It needs choice." Bradford opened a leather briefcase. "Mrs. O'Connor, if I may, I have prepared documents. Legal official." He held out the papers. "Here, a death certificate for your supposed late husband, Thomas Mackenzie, Caleb's brother. Here, a marriage certificate between Eleanor O'Connor and Thomas Mackenzie, performed in Pennsylvania 3 months before you arrived in Colorado. Here, the deed to the ranch passed to you as an inheritance from Henry O'Connor, all officially registered in the territory." Eleanor looked at the documents with trembling hands. They were perfect, detailed, complete, but "I'm not married. I never was." It's protection," Caleb interrupted. "It's a way to keep you and the baby legally safe. On paper, you are a respectable widow who inherited a ranch. No one can question it. No one can try to take the baby, claiming it's illegitimate. And if my father finds out? If Robert, your father has disowned you," Bradford said gently but firmly. "I read the letter. He has cut ties. Legally, you are no longer his problem. And as for Robert Ashford," his eyes hardened, "I've found out things about him. Things he wouldn't want made public. If he comes after you, he'll have his own problems to deal with." "What did you find out?" Eleanor needed to know. "Ashford has investments in mining companies. Continental Mining Corporation. Those companies funded militias that," Bradford glanced at Caleb, "attacked native communities, including the one that killed Morning Star and Benjamin." Eleanor felt her blood run cold. Robert was connected to the death of Caleb's wife?" Caleb confirmed with a stone-like expression. "Yes, we found out 2 months ago. Which is why when Zeke told me you were running from a marriage to Ashford," he looked at her, "I knew I couldn't let you fall into his hands. Not just because you need help, but because he is a monster. And monsters don't deserve to win." Grandmother Rain spoke again. "There is a network. Good people protect people who need it. We protect people your government wants to destroy. Natives without land, workers without rights, women without choices." She held Eleanor's hands. "You are now part of this network, and the network takes care of its own." Running Wolf, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "We helped 5 women last year. Women fleeing violence, forced marriages, impossible situations. All are safe now. All are building new lives. You are not the first. You will not be the last." Eleanor looked around, at Bradford with his legal documents, at Grandmother Rain with her wise hands, at Running Wolf with his eyes that had seen so much, at Zeke, firm and silent, at Caleb, who had chosen to protect her even when he had every reason not to. "Why do you do this?" Her voice came out small. "Why do you risk so much for strangers?" "Because we can," Caleb answered simply. "Because we have resources, land, knowledge. Because the system is broken, and someone has to fix the pieces they can. And because," he looked at the mountains, "because people I have loved were destroyed by this system. If I can prevent it from happening to others, I must." Bradford signed the final documents, stamped them officially. "Done. Eleanor Mackenzie, widow, owner of Timber Creek Ranch, legal in all respects." He handed the copies to her. "Keep them safe. They are your armor." That night, after the visitors had left, Eleanor sat with Caleb and Zeke around the fireplace. The fire crackled softly, the only sound besides the wind outside. "How many people have you helped?" Eleanor finally asked. Zeke and Caleb exchanged glances. 17 in the last 2 years, Zeke answered. "Not all of them stayed. Some moved on, found their own way. But they are all alive. They are all free. That's what matters. And if you're discovered?" "We will be," Caleb said calmly. "Eventually. But until then, we save as many as we can." Eleanor looked at the fire, processing. These men, this broken widower and this scarred ex-soldier, were heroes. Not heroes of grand stories, but real heroes. Silent heroes who did the right thing because it was right, not because they expected recognition. "I want to help," she declared. "When the baby is born, when I've recovered, I want to be part of this. I know accounting. I can read and write. I can teach. I can be useful." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, the first real smile Eleanor had seen from him. It transformed his face completely, chasing away the shadows. "Welcome to the family," he said simply, and Eleanor realized, with a surprise that warmed her chest more than the fire, this wasn't just a temporary refuge. This was becoming home. And homes, when built on truth and choice, are stronger than any mansion made of golden lies, more permanent than any castle built on shame. The first snow fell in November, transforming Timber Creek into a fairy tale landscape, silent, white, beautiful in a way that made the chest ache. Eleanor watched from the window, hands on her now unmistakable belly, feeling the baby move inside her. Small but insistent kicks, reminding her that life finds a way to continue even in the cruelest winter. She was 7 months along now, large, clumsy, tiring easily. Grandmother Rain visited weekly, bringing herbs, teaching Eleanor about childbirth, about newborn care, about traditional medicine that no Boston doctor knew. "This land heals," she would say, preparing herbal teas that smelled of the forest and promise. "But you must respect the land. You must listen," Eleanor learned. She learned the names of plants: sage for cleansing, mint for nausea, chamomile for sleep, lavender for calm. She learned how the land spoke through the seasons, how each plant had a purpose, how waste was a sin against nature's generosity. She also learned about Caleb, watching him when he thought she wasn't looking. She saw how he cared for the animals with a firm gentleness, how he spoke to the horses in soft Gaelic, how he mended fences with hands that could be hard as stone, but chose to be gentle. How at night he played a wooden flute he had made years ago, sad melodies that told stories of a lost land and a dead love. One December night, when the snow fell so thick you couldn't see beyond the porch, Eleanor woke with a pain in her back. Intense, persistent, different from the usual discomforts of pregnancy. She got up, walked around the house trying to relieve it, but the pain only worsened. And then it came, a true contraction squeezing her belly like a giant fist. It was early. 8 months. But clearly the baby had other plans. "Caleb!" she shouted, her voice breaking with fear. "Caleb, the baby! The baby is coming!" He appeared in seconds, shirtless, hair disheveled from sleep but completely alert. "Now?" His eyes went straight to her belly. "I think so." The pain... Another contraction hit stronger and Eleanor doubled over, groaning. Caleb took control immediately. "Zeke!" he shouted. "Ride to Grandmother Rain's. Now Eleanor's in labor." Zeke appeared, already putting on a coat. "I'll go, but the snow is heavy. It'll take at least 2 hours to bring her. Then go fast." Caleb helped Eleanor back to the room, settled her in bed, brought towels, water, everything he knew would be necessary. His hands were trembling slightly, Eleanor noticed. He was scared too. "Caleb," she held his hand during the next contraction. "What if something goes wrong?" "It won't." But the uncertainty in his eyes betrayed his words. "Morningstar taught me a few things, the basics of childbirth, and Grandmother Rain will be here soon. You're strong, Eleanor. Stronger than you think." The next few hours were a blur of pain, fear, and endless waiting. Contractions came in waves, each one stronger than the last. Eleanor screamed, cried, cursed Daniel for leaving her, cursed herself for every choice that had led to this moment. Caleb stayed by her side. He didn't leave once. He held her hand when she needed it, wiped the sweat from her face, spoke gentle words in Gaelic that she didn't understand, but that soothed something deep inside her. "You can do this," he repeated. "I know you can. I saw you cross a whole country alone. I saw you rebuild a life from nothing. A baby is just one more mountain to climb. And on the other side is a love you never imagined possible." When Grandmother Rain finally arrived, covered in snow, Eleanor was exhausted beyond description. "How long?" the elder asked immediately, assessing the situation with experienced eyes. 7 hours, Caleb answered, his voice hoarse. "Contractions every 5 minutes." "Good." Grandmother Rain washed her hands, approached. "She's progressing, but the baby wants to come fast. Let's help it." What followed was a battle. There is no other word. Childbirth wasn't the delicate, beautiful moment books describe. It was a war between body and will, between life fighting to enter the world and the world resisting. Eleanor pushed, until she felt she would break. She screamed until her voice was gone. She held Caleb's hand with a force that left marks. "One more time," Grandmother Rain commanded. "I see the head. One more!" And with a final monumental effort, a final cry that tore something primal from within her, Eleanor pushed. She felt the baby slide out, felt the immediate relief and the strange emptiness where life had been growing. Then the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, a cry, the sharp, indignant cry of a newborn facing the world for the first time. A girl. Grandmother Rain held up the baby, a tiny, pink, furious body. Strong, healthy, perfect. She cleaned her quickly, wrapped her in a blanket and placed her in Eleanor's arms. And Eleanor looked down, at the crumpled face, the closed eyes, the tiny clenched fists, and felt a love so intense it almost hurt. This was her baby, hers and Daniel's, a piece of the love she thought was lost forever. "Hello," she whispered, tears streaming. "Hello, little one. You're so beautiful, so perfect." Caleb was beside the bed, looking at the baby with an expression Eleanor couldn't quite decipher. There was pain there, yes, the memory of the son he had lost, but there was something else too, something soft, something like hope. "What will you name her?" he asked quietly. Eleanor already knew. She had decided months ago. "Anna Rose," she said. "Anna for my mother, Rose for Morningstar." She looked at Caleb. "If you'll allow it." "I know that." Morningstar would have loved it. Caleb gently touched the baby's head, his large finger against a skull so small. "Anna Rose Mackenzie. A beautiful name for a beautiful girl. Mackenzie, his last name, his protection, his love, even if it wasn't romantic love yet." Grandmother Rain finished caring for Eleanor, making sure everything was all right. Then she sat down, exhausted herself. Long night, but it ended well. "Healthy baby, strong mother. That's all that matters." She looked between Caleb and Eleanor. "You two did well. You worked together. That's how a family works." Caleb stayed with Eleanor all that night. He refused to leave, even when she insisted he needed rest. He sat in the chair beside the bed, watching as Eleanor breastfed Anna for the first time. A clumsy, painful process, but also miraculous. "Caleb," Eleanor called in the pre-dawn quiet. "Yes? Thank you. For everything. For not judging me. For protecting me. For..." Her voice failed. "For being here. I don't know if I could have done it alone." "You weren't alone." He looked at her, at Anna sleeping in her arms. "And you'll never be alone again. That's a promise." In the following weeks, life established a new rhythm. Eleanor recovered slowly, her body healing from the trauma of childbirth. Annie, as they began to call her, was a calm baby, thank God, sleeping for reasonable stretches and crying only when she truly needed something. Caleb transformed. Eleanor saw it happen day by day. She saw how he looked at Annie with a tenderness he never showed, how he picked her up with extreme care, as if holding the most precious crystal, how he sang to her in Gaelic, ancient melodies he probably learned from his own mother, how gradually Annie began to smile when she saw his face. "You're a natural with her," Eleanor commented one January morning, watching Caleb rock Annie while making coffee with one hand. "I've had practice," he said simply. "Benjamin was 3 when..." He stopped, not needing to finish. "I know how to care for small children. She likes you. I like her," he admitted, and there was surprise in his own voice. "I didn't expect to. I thought it would be too painful. But it's different. Annie doesn't replace Benjamin. But she reminds me that a heart can love again, even after it's been broken." Eleanor felt something tighten in her chest. Something warm and unexpected and frightening in its intensity. She was falling in love with Caleb Mackenzie. She hadn't planned it. Love wasn't part of the deal. He had offered protection, not romance. But how could you not love a man who woke in the middle of the night when the baby cried? Who changed diapers without complaining? Who sang lullabies as if it were the most natural thing in the world? How could you not love a man who chose day after day to be a father to a daughter who was not his own? But Eleanor kept these feelings close to her heart, locked behind careful walls. Caleb still loved Morningstar. She saw it in how he spoke of her, how he kept her garden, how he still wore his wedding ring. She had no right to ask for more. He had already given so much. February came and went. March brought the first signs of spring. Melting snow, green shoots timidly emerging, days getting minimally longer. Annie turned 2 months old, growing strong and healthy, filling the house with gurgles and small smiles. And Timber Creek continued to be a refuge, not just for Eleanor and Annie, but for others that Bradford, Zeke, and Caleb brought. A woman fleeing an abusive husband, a young native whose lands had been taken, a Chinese railroad worker unjustly wanted. All found temporarily or permanently a safe place at Timber Creek, and Eleanor, using the skills she had learned in Boston, writing, accounting, education, helped. She taught English. She kept records. She wrote letters. She turned pain into purpose. One April night, Caleb knocked on Eleanor's bedroom door. She was nursing Annie before bed, rocking her gently in the chair he had made. "May I come in?" he asked through the door. "Yes." He entered, holding something behind his back. He looked uncomfortable, vulnerable in a way Eleanor rarely saw. "Is Annie all right?" he asked first, always concerned. "Perfect. She ate well today." Eleanor smiled. "I think she inherited my appetite." Caleb smiled too, brief but genuine. Then he held out what he was holding, a small leather-bound book. "I found this among Morning Star's things. It's her journal, written in the last few months before she died. I read it again recently. There's a passage I'd like to read to you, if you'll allow it." Eleanor nodded, curious and a little nervous. Caleb opened the book, found the page he had clearly marked. "She wrote this 2 weeks before she died." His voice was controlled but emotional. "I dreamt that Caleb will live long after me. I dreamt that he will love again. Not less for loving me, but better for having learned to love through loss. I dreamt of a woman with hair of fire and a child who needs a father. They told me to say, 'Caleb, do not be afraid to live. Do not be afraid to love. Do not be afraid to be a father again. It would do you good. It would make your heart remember it is alive.'" Absolute silence. Only the sound of Annie suckling softly, already half asleep. Eleanor looked at Caleb, saw tears in his eyes. "I thought it would be a betrayal," he confessed. "Caring for you, loving Annie. I thought Morning Star would be hurt. But she knew. Somehow she knew." He closed the book. "And I'm tired of fighting what I feel. Tired of pretending I don't care more than I should." Eleanor's heart quickened. "Caleb, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you brought life back to this house. You brought a reason to wake up in the morning that isn't just about surviving. I'm saying I look at Annie and I see a future, not just a painful past." He knelt beside her chair, looking directly at Eleanor. "I'm saying I've fallen in love with you. For your courage, your kindness, your strength. And I don't know if it's too soon, if it's inappropriate, if you still love Annie's father too much to consider. But I had to say it. I had to let you know." Eleanor couldn't speak for a moment. Tears came, silent and inevitable. "I loved Daniel," she said finally. "I will always love him, just as you will always love Morning Star. But love doesn't have a quantity limit, only a depth. And She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I've fallen in love with you too, Caleb. I didn't plan it. I didn't expect it. But it happened, and I don't know what to do with it." Caleb smiled, tears streaming down his own face now. "I do," he said. "We get married. Not just on paper, but for real. We make this a real family, not just a legal protection. I raise Annie as my daughter. You let me love her as if she were. And we build a life together. Not perfect, because no life is, but honest, real ours. A real marriage. If you want it. If you'll have me. A broken man with a heavy past, but a future I promise will be better." Eleanor looked at Annie, already asleep in her arms. Then she looked at Caleb, kneeling like an ancient knight asking for a princess's hand. But she wasn't a princess. And he wasn't a knight. They were just two broken people who had found in each other a way to heal. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll have you. I want this. I want you. I want this family." Caleb kissed her then, gentle, careful, as if she were as precious as Annie. And for a moment, the outside world disappeared. There was no Boston, no past, no fear. Only the present, only love. And love, they discovered, was a stronger refuge than any mountain could offer. It was a home they carried inside no matter where they were. Spring exploded at Timber Creek with breathtaking intensity. Morning Star's garden awoke from winter, wildflowers blooming in unlikely colors, herbs sprouting between the rocks, life insisting on returning even where death had left its mark. Eleanor walked through the garden with Annie in her arms, now 4 months old, strong and healthy. The little girl watched everything with wide eyes, trying to touch the flowers with tiny hands that didn't yet fully obey her will. "Look, Annie." Eleanor bent down, letting her daughter touch the soft petals of a purple flower. "Lavender. Grandmother Rain says it calms the spirit." Annie gurgled happily, trying to put the flower in her mouth. "No, my love. Just look." Eleanor laughed, pulling the curious little hand away. Caleb watched from the porch, leaning against a wooden pillar, his arms crossed. There was a peace on his face now, a peace that didn't exist when Eleanor had arrived nearly a year ago. The shadows still inhabited his eyes, they always would, but they were no longer the only tenants. There was light, too. There was a future. "You're staring," Eleanor called without turning, smiling. "I am," he admitted without shame. "It's a sight I never thought I'd see again. The woman I love in the garden my first wife planted, holding a child I've chosen to love as my own." He came down the steps, approaching. "Morning Star would say this is balance. Life honoring death through more life." Eleanor turned to him, and something in her chest tightened with a love so intense it almost hurt. How had she gotten here? From the suffocating mansion in Boston, fleeing pregnant and desperate, to this garden in the mountains loved and safe. Mystery, grace, luck, perhaps all of those things together. "Caleb?" she began, but he placed a finger on her lips. "I know what you're going to say, that you don't deserve it, that you've been too lucky, that you're afraid it's a dream." He smiled. "I think that every day too. But then I wake up and you're here, Annie is here, and I realize that dreams can become real when we stop fighting them." "I want to marry you," Eleanor declared suddenly, firmly. "Not just on paper, for real. With Grandmother Rain and Bradford and Zeke present, with Annie there. I want vows that mean something, not just legal protection." Caleb's eyes lit up. "When?" "September. I arrived in July. Annie was born in February. September would be complete. A full year of transformation." "September, then." He kissed her softly, careful not to crush Annie between them. "We'll marry in September, and it will be a new beginning for all of us." The following months were about preparation and growth. Eleanor continued learning medicine with Grandmother Rain, discovering she had a natural gift for healing. Her hands, which in Boston had only held teacups and fans, now prepared ointments, stitched wounds, soothed fevers. Annie grew too fast, as all children do. 6 months, then 7. She started sitting up on her own, laughing out loud when Caleb made faces, reaching out her little arms when she saw Zeke coming. The house filled with the sounds of childhood, gurgles, laughter, cries when she was tired. And gradually, without them noticing exactly when it started, Annie called Caleb Pa, not Daddy yet, just Pa, a simple syllable that carried a world of meaning. The first time, Caleb froze. Eleanor saw tears fill his eyes. He picked Annie up, hugged her tightly, his face buried in her small neck. "Pa," Annie repeated, happy to have discovered a new word. "Pa, pa, pa." "Yes?" Caleb whispered, his voice broken. "Yes, my sweet, Pa, I'm your Pa, forever." Eleanor cried too, witnessing that moment of healing. Caleb becoming a father again. Annie gaining a father who chose to love her, not by blood obligation, but by a choice of the heart. August arrived hot and golden. The wedding preparations were simple but meaningful. Eleanor sewed a white dress from simple fabric, nothing like the elaborate wedding gown she had abandoned in Boston, but infinitely more beautiful for its honesty. Zeke carved wedding rings from pine wood, humble but permanent. Grandmother Rain prepared aromatic herbs for the ceremony. 2 days before the wedding, Caleb took Eleanor on horseback to a special place, a clearing hidden among the pines, where a small stream formed a crystal-clear pond. It was a place of silence and raw beauty, where nature spoke louder than any human word. "Morning Star is buried here," he said quietly, pointing to carefully arranged stones forming a small memorial. Wildflowers grew around it, intentionally planted. "And Benjamin. I brought their bodies here after the massacre. I didn't want them in an official cemetery, surrounded by people who allowed them to be killed." Eleanor dismounted, approaching the memorial with reverence. She knelt, touching the stones gently. "Hello, Morning Star," she whispered, feeling foolish but also certain it was necessary. "I know we never met, but I love the man you loved, and I care for the garden you planted, and thank you for telling him in dreams that he could love again, for giving me a permission I didn't know I needed." Caleb knelt beside her. "She would have liked you," he said. "She would have taught you so many things, about plants, about medicine, about the quiet strength that women carry." He placed fresh flowers on the memorial. "We're getting married in 2 days, Morning Star. I wanted you to know." "I wanted." "Your blessing, if spirits can give such things." The wind blew through the clearing, making the pines whisper, and maybe it was just the wind, or maybe it was something more. But Eleanor felt a peace descend over her like a warm blanket. "She approves," she said with a certainty she didn't know where it came from. "I feel it." Caleb looked at her surprised. "I feel it too," he admitted. "For the first time since she died, I feel like I've truly let her go. Not forgotten. I'll never forget. But I've let go of the pain. I've kept only the love." They rode back in silence, but it was a complete silence, not an empty one. The silence of people who have found peace with their past and are ready for the future. September 1st, 1878, the wedding day. The morning dawned clear and perfect, as if the sky itself conspired to make the day special. Eleanor woke to Annie already awake beside her, playing with her own toes, babbling in a baby language only she understood. "Good morning, my love." Eleanor kissed her chubby belly, making Annie laugh. "Today is an important day. Your pa and I are getting married for real. And you'll be there to witness it." Mary Callahan had arrived 2 days earlier. She had traveled all the way from Boston to be there. When Eleanor saw her step off the stagecoach, they both cried, hugging with the force of people who had survived a storm together. "You look beautiful." Mary had said, holding Eleanor by the shoulders, studying her face. Happy, truly happy, not like in Boston, where you smiled out of obligation. This is real. It's real, Eleanor had confirmed, tears streaming. Everything is real now. Mary helped Eleanor get dressed. The simple white dress, wildflowers in her hair. No jewelry besides the wooden ring Caleb would soon place on her finger. She was beautiful not because of artifice, but because of the happiness that radiated from her like its own light. Caleb waited in Morningstar's garden, dressed in clean but simple clothes, his hair tamed for the first time Eleanor had seen. Zeke stood beside him, smiling broadly. Grandmother Rain had positioned herself where the ceremony would take place, surrounded by a circle of stones and flowers. Bradford was there too, with official documents that would make the union legal in the eyes of the territory. A small community had gathered. Families Caleb and Zeke had helped over the years, some ranch hands, Running Wolf, and other members of Morningstar's tribe. There weren't many, perhaps 20 people, but they were the right people, the ones who mattered. Eleanor walked through the garden with Annie in her arms. Mary carried a small bouquet of lavender and wild roses, and when Caleb saw her, when his eyes met hers across the distance, Eleanor saw a love so pure it made everything she had suffered worthwhile. Grandmother Rain began the ceremony in a mix of English and her native tongue, the words flowing like a stream, ancient, powerful, laden with meaning that transcended translation. Marriage is not just the union of two people, she said. It is the weaving of two stories into one. It is a choice made not once but every day. It is a promise to walk together, even when the path is steep. She looked at Caleb. You have lost love before. You know the price of loss. But now you choose to love again, knowing that love always has a price. That is a rare courage. Caleb nodded, his voice firm when he spoke. Eleanor, I promise to protect you and Annie with everything I am. I promise to honor your strength, respect your choices, support your dreams. I promise to be a father to your daughter, as if she were my own by blood because she is mine by choice. I promise to love you not despite your past, but including it, because your past made you who you are. And who you are. Here's everything I ever needed without knowing I was looking. Eleanor was crying now, silent tears streaming as she held Annie with one arm and Caleb's hand with the other. Caleb, I promise to walk beside you, not behind or in front. I promise to honor the memory of Morningstar and Benjamin, never trying to replace them, but honoring the love you had for them. I promise to build a family with you, a chosen family, not an imposed one. I promise to be strong when you need it, vulnerable when you allow it, and always, always honest. You saved me. But more than that, you let me save myself. For that I will be grateful every day of my life. Bradford presented the rings, simple wooden circles that Zeke had spent weeks polishing until they shone. Caleb slid the ring onto Eleanor's finger, and she did the same. Wood against skin, a symbol of something organic, alive, capable of growth. By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, Bradford began, but Grandmother Rain gently interrupted him. By the power vested by the earth, the sky, the ancestors who came before, she placed her hands over theirs. I declare you husband and wife, united not just by law but by choice, united not just by convenience but by love, she smiled. You may kiss your bride, Caleb Mackenzie. And he did. Deeply, completely, not caring about the audience. He kissed her like a man who had found an oasis after crossing a desert, like a man who thought he would never love again, but discovered that the heart is more resilient than stone. Annie, squished between them, protested with a small cry, making everyone laugh. Sorry, little one. Caleb picked her up, lifting her high. But your Ma and I are having a moment here. Ma. It was the first time he had called her that out loud. Eleanor felt her heart melt completely. The celebration was simple but joyful. Food prepared by the community. Music played by Running Wolf on a traditional flute. Children running through the garden. Zeke made a toast. I knew Caleb in his worst days, when he thought he would never smile again. And I met Eleanor when she arrived, scared and alone, carrying a secret she thought would destroy everything. He raised his glass. But look at them now. Look at what they've built. A chosen family. A love that healed wounds that seemed mortal. This is hope. For all of us. Cheers! Everyone shouted. The evening fell softly. The guests gradually departed, leaving words of blessing and sincere hugs. Mary was the last to go, hugging Eleanor tightly. Be happy, she whispered. Daniel would have approved. Wherever he is, he's happy knowing you found this. When they were finally alone, Caleb, Eleanor, with Annie already fast asleep, they sat on the porch under a sky full of stars, impossible to describe. We're married, Eleanor said, still processing. For real now. For real. Caleb pulled her closer. Scared? Terrified, she admitted honestly. but less than living without you would scare me." He kissed her hair, a comfortable silence descending between them. And there, under stars as old as time, with their daughter sleeping and a future opening up like a flower, Eleanor finally allowed herself to believe she deserved this. She deserved to be happy. She deserved unconditional love. She deserved peace. But peace, she would soon discover, was a fragile thing, and the past had a habit of not staying buried when there were people determined to dig it up. Just 2 weeks after the wedding, while Eleanor was at the general store in Silver Creek buying supplies, a strange man appeared, tall, too well-dressed for the small town, with eyes that scanned everything as if assessing property. "Mrs. Mackenzie?" He approached, tipping his hat. "Eleanor Mackenzie, born O'Connor." Eleanor's blood ran cold. No one there knew her maiden name. No one was supposed to know. "Who's asking?" She kept her voice firm. "Frederick Monroe. I work for the Continental Mining Corporation, representing the interests of Robert Ashford." He smiled, but it was a snake's smile. "Mr. Ashford would like to have a word with you about pending matters." "I have no pending matters with Robert Ashford." Eleanor turned to leave, but Monroe blocked her path. "I believe you do, ma'am. A marriage contract, for instance. It was never officially annulled. Technically, you are still his promised bride." He tilted his head. "And there's the matter of the child. Mr. Ashford is interested in meeting your daughter. Quite interested, I'd say." Eleanor felt panic rising. How did he know about Annie? How had they found her? "Get out of my way," she said, her voice low but dangerous. "Just delivering a message, ma'am. Mr. Ashford will arrive in Colorado in 2 weeks, with your father, William O'Connor, and with federal representatives." Monroe put his hat back on. "I suggest you prepare your explanations. Running away from a commitment is one thing. Having an illegitimate child and registering it with a false name, that can have serious legal consequences." He left before Eleanor could respond, leaving her trembling with fear and anger. Caleb was waiting in the wagon when she came out. One look was enough. "What happened?" "They found me." Eleanor could barely speak. "Robert, my father, they're coming here in 2 weeks." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then we'll prepare," he said simply. "We have Bradford, we have the legal documents, we have an entire community ready to testify, and we have the truth. You've done nothing wrong, Eleanor. Remember that." But when they were alone that night, when Annie was asleep and the house was quiet, Eleanor allowed herself to break down. "What if they take her?" she sobbed against Caleb's chest. "What if they convince a court I'm unfit? What if—" "They won't." Caleb held her tightly. "They won't, because I won't let them. I will fight, Eleanor, with everything I have. Annie is our daughter, ours, and no one has the right to take her from us." But they both knew the fear was justified, because Robert Ashford had power, and power, in the hands of unscrupulous men, was a deadly weapon. The storm was coming, and this time there were no mountains high enough to hide behind. June 1879. Annie was 4 months old when Robert Ashford arrived at Timber Creek. He did not come alone. He brought a whole entourage. William O'Connor, older and more bitter than Eleanor remembered. 2 federal representatives, with perfect ties and stern expressions. Frederick Monroe, and a lawyer, a man with a sharp face carrying a briefcase full of accusatory documents. Eleanor held Annie to her chest as she saw the carriages arrive. The little girl, sensing her mother's tension, began to whimper. "It's all right, my..." Eleanor kissed her soft hair. "Mommy won't let anything bad happen." Caleb was beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back, a gesture of support and protection. Zeke had positioned himself on the other side, his rifle not visible but definitely within reach. Bradford had arrived 2 days earlier, preparing a legal defense. Grandmother Rain was in the house, preparing calming teas and offering silent wisdom. Robert Ashford got out first. 36 now, his hair still perfectly combed, his clothes too expensive for this place. He looked around with ill-disguised disdain, at the simple ranch, the wild mountains, at everything that wasn't refined Boston. Then his eyes found Eleanor, and something in them made her want to retreat. It wasn't love, it never had been. It was possession. Anger at having been defied, a determination to reclaim what he considered his. "Eleanor," he said, as if speaking to a disobedient child, "what a scene you've caused." "Mr. Ashford," she kept her voice cold, "you were not invited to my property." "Your property?" He laughed, a humorless sound. "I think there's some confusion about what's yours, including the child." William O'Connor finally looked at his daughter. Eleanor saw the shock in his eyes when he saw Annie, his granddaughter, blood of his blood, but his expression quickly hardened. "Eleanor, you have shamed us," he said, his voice hard, "but there may be a solution. If you return to Boston, marry Robert properly, we can find..." An arrangement for the child. An arrangement? Fury replaced fear in Eleanor's voice. You're talking about my daughter, father. Not a problem to be solved. An illegitimate child is a problem, Robert intervened. But I am a generous man. I will still marry you, Eleanor. And I will adopt the little bastard. We'll give her a respectable name. Of course, you will agree to be temporarily institutionalized after the wedding. For your health. Frail nerves, you understand. And the child will be raised properly, away from unsuitable influences. Eleanor understood immediately. Robert wanted the marriage for her money, for her family's connections. He planned to lock her in an asylum, take Annie, and raise her as a possession. Or worse, send her to an orphanage and forget her. No, she said simply. Not now. Not ever. It's not your choice to make. Robert's lawyer opened his briefcase. We have here a marriage contract signed by your father, which committed you to Mr. Ashford. Running away does not nullify a contract. Technically, you have committed a breach of promise, and we have testimonies that you registered the child with a false name, Mackenzie, when it is in fact O'Connor. That is fraud. Bradford stepped forward. Judge William Bradford, territorial, and I can assure you there is no fraud. Eleanor O'Connor legally married Thomas Mackenzie in November of 1877, before arriving in Colorado. Thomas died 2 months later. The child is a Mackenzie by legal right. Here are the documents. He held out the certificates. The lawyer examined the papers, frowning. These seem authentic. They are authentic, Bradford confirmed. Properly registered. And what's more, Eleanor married again 6 months ago, to Caleb Mackenzie, her late husband's brother. A completely legal marriage. She is Eleanor Mackenzie now, and the child has a living, present father. Robert looked at Caleb for the first time, sizing him up. He saw a big, strong man with a warlike scar and eyes that didn't back down. This is your husband? He asked with disdain. A manual laborer. Raising another man's child? Raising my daughter, Caleb corrected, his voice dangerously calm. And being a better father than a man like you could be in 1,000 lifetimes. Bold. Robert smiled coldly. But unfortunately for you, I have more cards to play, Mr. Monroe. Monroe handed over more documents. We've investigated Mr. Mackenzie. Interesting to find he's been involved in questionable activities, harboring fugitives, helping criminals escape justice, specifically Chinese workers wanted for breach of contract, Native Americans who should be on reservations. He smiled. That's a federal crime, Mr. Mackenzie. Eleanor felt the world tilt. They knew about the protection network. But Bradford remained calm. Serious accusations. You would need proof, witnesses, and you would have to prove that any help given wasn't simply Christian charity, which is perfectly legal. We have witnesses, the lawyer insisted. Bought witnesses? Zeke finally spoke. Because I can bring 50 people here who will testify to Caleb's character, including a Methodist reverend, respectable families, former soldiers like myself. A Buffalo soldier, sir. I served my country. And I tell you that Caleb Mackenzie is the most honest man I have ever known. One of the federal representatives finally spoke. This is a circus. We came to assess the child's situation, not to discuss politics. He looked at Annie, still in Eleanor's arms. The child seems healthy, well cared for. What exactly is the basis for removing her? Robert realized he was losing control of the situation. The basis is that the mother is a fugitive who abandoned a legal commitment, lied about her identity, and now lives with a man of dubious reputation in the middle of nowhere. The child deserves better. She deserves an education, proper society, a future. A child deserves love. Eleanor found her voice surprisingly firm. Something you, Robert, would never offer, because you didn't love me. You never did. You saw me as a business transaction. You saw my father as a useful connection. And you would see my daughter as, what, a burden? A weapon against me? She stepped forward, defiant. I came to Colorado because it was my only choice. Staying meant being destroyed. Marrying you meant living a dead life. I fled not out of cowardice, but for survival, and I built a life here. A good life, with a good man, raising my daughter in love and safety. If that's a crime, then I am a criminal. But I don't regret it. Not one bit. Absolute silence followed her words. Even Robert seemed speechless for a moment. It was William O'Connor who broke the silence, his voice strangely weak. Eleanor, do you really love this man? This Caleb? Eleanor looked at Caleb, saw the love and support in his eyes. Then she looked at her father. I do, with all that I am. He saved me when no one else would, including you, father. You chose reputation over my happiness. You chose Robert's money over my well-being. Caleb chose me. Every time. Without hesitation. Something crossed William's face. Guilt perhaps, remorse, but it hardened again. You destroyed us. Society laughs at us. No, Caleb intervened. You destroyed yourself by trying to sell your daughter like cattle. Eleanor just refused to be sold. At that moment, Grandmother Rain emerged from the house, carrying a tray with tea. Behind her, as if orchestrated, the entire community began to appear. Families Caleb had helped. Ranch workers. Running Wolf with a group from his tribe. One by one, they formed a silent but imposing circle around Eleanor and Caleb. You want witnesses? Grandmother Rain said, her ancient voice carrying authority. Here they are. Every person here will tell you that Eleanor Mackenzie is a good mother, that Caleb Mackenzie is a good father, that this child is loved beyond measure. She looked directly at Robert. And every person here will fight before they let you take this family. One of the federal agents, apparently less corrupt than Monroe, looked uncomfortable. Mr. Ashford, with all due respect, this seems like personal revenge, not genuine concern for the child's welfare. The child is clearly well cared for. The mother is legally married. The family has community support. I see no legal basis for intervention, and I see a conflict of interest, Bradford added calmly. Did you know that Robert Ashford is an investor in Continental Mining, the same company that funded the militias that massacred Caleb Mackenzie's family 2 years ago? Including his pregnant wife and small son? He let the words sink in. This isn't about Eleanor. It's about Caleb. It's an attempt to silence a man who knows too much about Continental's illegal operations. Robert turned pale. Monroe looked like he wanted to disappear. The lawyer quickly tried to deflect. Unproven accusations, proven. Bradford pulled out his own set of documents. I have here financial records, correspondence, testimonies, all legally obtained. Continental Mining funded the militia that attacked the Arapaho community in 1877, an attack not authorized by the federal government. Mass murder. And Mr. Ashford, as a principal investor, had knowledge of and approved the funds. He looked at the federal agents. This is a federal crime. Conspiracy to commit homicide. Absolute silence. Even the birds stopped singing. Robert understood he had lost. Completely lost. He tried to appeal to William. Mr. O'Connor, surely you won't allow... But William was looking at Eleanor. At the granddaughter he had never really known, and something in his old face changed. It broke. Robert, he said slowly, you lied to me. You said Eleanor ran away on a whim. You said the child was a shame. But I look at her now. His voice failed. I look and I see my Anna. I see my late wife in every feature. And I realize I have made a terrible mistake. Mr. O'Connor... Silence. William raised a hand. He walked to Eleanor slowly, each step seeming to weigh a ton. Eleanor, my daughter. Tears were streaming now. Forgive me. For everything. For trying to force you to marry. For choosing pride over your well-being. For not being the father you deserved. Eleanor was holding Annie so tightly the little girl protested. Tears were streaming down her own face. Father, no, let me finish. He looked at Annie. This is my granddaughter, blood of my blood. And I see now that she is where she belongs. With a mother who loves her. With a father, he looked at Caleb, who chose to love her. I will not try to separate this family. I will not compound one mistake with a greater one. He turned to Robert, his voice hard again. The engagement is annulled, officially. Eleanor owes you nothing. And if you continue to pursue her, I will use all my influence as a judge to ensure that your illegal activities with Continental are thoroughly investigated. Do you understand? Robert was livid with rage, but he knew when a battle was lost. This isn't over, he spat. It is, Bradford corrected. And Mr. Ashford? I strongly suggest you leave Colorado today, because I can assure you that if you don't, you will be facing criminal charges before sundown. The federal agents, seeing a potential scandal, quickly decided they had more important things to do. Monroe disappeared like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. The lawyer muttered apologies and fled to his carriage. Robert stayed for a final moment, looking at Eleanor with pure hatred. You could have had everything, he said bitterly. I have everything, Eleanor replied, her voice firm. I have love, family, freedom, things your money could never buy. He left without another word, his entourage dissolving like mist under the sun. William remained. May I? He hesitated, looking at Annie. May I meet her? My granddaughter. Eleanor looked at Caleb, who nodded gently. She approached her father slowly. Her name is Anna Rose, Anna for my mother. Rose for Morning Star, Caleb's first wife. She's 4 months old. She's strong, healthy, happy. Her voice broke. She is my everything. William reached out a trembling hand, gently touching Annie's cheek. The little girl looked at him with curiosity without fear. "She has Anna's eyes," he whispered. "Your mother's eyes." The tears fell freely now. "Eleanor, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But if you'll allow it, I would like to know her, not as a controller, but as a grandfather who has finally learned that family is about love, not control." Eleanor felt something in her chest soften. The anger was still there, of course. Wounds didn't heal completely in moments. But she saw a broken old man before her, realizing too late what he had lost. "You can visit her," she said finally, "but Annie is my daughter and Caleb's. We are the ones who decide how she is raised. And if you ever try to control or manipulate again—" "I won't, I promise." William kissed Annie's forehead gently. "I just want to know my granddaughter, to know the daughter I never really knew. If you'll allow me that, I will be grateful until my last day." He stayed for a week. He got to know Timber Creek. He saw how Caleb treated Eleanor and Annie. He saw the community that had formed there. And gradually, very gradually, something in him began to heal too. The day he left, he hugged Eleanor for the first time since she was a child. "You've built something beautiful here," he said. "Something I, with all my money and power, could never build. A real life, real love." He looked at the mountains. "I'll be back in a few months, if you'll have me. I want to see Annie grow. I want to try to be better." "It's never too late to try, is it?" "It's never too late for love," Eleanor confirmed. "Caleb taught me that." And then he was gone, leaving not a complete reconciliation, but the seed of a possibility. The storm had passed, and on the other side, as always happens after storms, the sky was clearer, the air purer, the future brighter. Autumn of 1879 painted Timber Creek in impossible shades, crimson, gold, orange, so vivid it seemed to hurt the eyes. Eleanor walked through the garden with Annie, now 7 months old, carried in a sling against her chest. The little girl watched everything with enormous eyes, pointing at falling leaves and laughing when she tried to catch them. "Look, Annie." Eleanor picked up a golden leaf, turning it in the light. "This is autumn, a time to harvest what we've planted, a time to be thankful for abundance." And there was abundance. Not of money. Timber Creek would never be rich in the material sense, but an abundance of life, of love, of purpose. Caleb had turned part of the barn into a small clinic. Eleanor, with her growing knowledge of medicine taught by Grandmother Rain, attended to people from the region. She didn't charge those who couldn't pay, accepting a chicken, vegetables, or labor in exchange. Bradford had managed to get her official territorial recognition as a healer, even without a formal diploma. "It's about results," Bradford had explained. "And you have results. You saved 3 children from pneumonia last winter. You helped 6 women through difficult births. You healed infections that town doctors had given up on. The territory needs people like you. Formal education is less important than real competence." Zeke had expanded the ranch operations, turning it into a cooperative. Workers had a share in the profits, a voice in decisions. It was radical for the time, but it worked. Productivity had increased. Loyalty was absolute. And the protection network continued. More discreet now after the confrontation with Robert, but still active. 2 women were temporarily housed in a small cabin they had built on the edge of the property. One fleeing an abusive marriage, the other an indigenous widow whose lands had been stolen. Timber Creek had grown too, a small town now officially recognized. A school had been built, partially funded by William O'Connor, who had discovered that guilt was a powerful motivator for change. Helena taught there twice a week, dividing her time between the clinic and education. Life had a rhythm, a purpose, a meaning. It was happiness. Real, imperfect, but absolutely genuine. One October evening, after putting Annie to sleep, a process that now involved 3 lullabies, 2 made-up stories, and countless kisses, Eleanor found Caleb on the porch. He was playing his flute softly, a melody she had learned to associate with contentment. She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how life surprises you." He stopped playing, wrapping an arm around her. 3 years ago, I was sure I would live the rest of my days alone. Frozen in grief, unable to move on. He kissed her hair. "Then you arrived, pregnant, scared, lying about your identity." She felt him smile. "The smallest, most fragile person I had ever seen, but with more courage than an entire army. I wasn't brave. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of it." Caleb turned her to face him. "Eleanor, you gave me a reason to live again. Annie gave me a reason to smile. You both reminded me that a heart doesn't die when it breaks. It just reforms. Different, but still capable of love." Eleanor felt tears well up. The damn tears that came so easily since the pregnancy and had never really stopped. "I'm pregnant again," she blurted out, surprising herself by saying it so abruptly. Caleb froze. "What? Pregnant? 2 months, I think. Grandmother Rain confirmed it yesterday." She searched his eyes, afraid of what she might find. Rejection? Fear? "I know we didn't plan it. I know Annie is still so little, but—" He kissed her, deeply, completely, his hands framing her face as if holding the most precious thing in the world. "But nothing," he said when they finally separated. "Eleanor, you're giving me a child. Our child. Not Daniel's, not from the past, but ours." His voice broke with emotion. "Do you know how long I've waited for this? For a chance to be a father again. To raise a child from birth? You are a father to Annie, and I always will be. She is my daughter in every sense that matters." He placed a hand over Eleanor's still flat stomach. "But this one is different. This one we planned together, created from our love. This one is pure future. No shadows, no fears. Just promise." Eleanor cried then deeply, all the months of tension releasing. Caleb held her, rocking her gently, murmuring kind words in Gaelic that she didn't understand, but that soothed something deep inside her. Spring of 1880 arrived with an explosion of life. The flowers in Morningstar's garden covered it so densely it looked like a colorful carpet. Annie, now 10 months old, began to take her first wobbly steps, falling more than walking but laughing each time. And Eleanor grew with her pregnancy. Different from the first. This time she didn't hide, wasn't afraid, didn't carry a secret. She wore her belly with pride, letting Annie touch it when the baby kicked, laughing when Caleb spoke to her womb in Gaelic. "What are you saying?" Eleanor asked one night. "I'm saying we can't wait to meet you. That you will be loved even before you're born. That you will have a sister who will protect you, and parents who would give everything for you." Caleb kissed her belly softly. "And that you will be born in a free land, under an open sky, into a chosen family." The best start anyone could ask for. In May, Bradford arrived with surprising news. "Robert Ashford is in prison," he announced without preamble. The investigation into Continental Mining revealed everything. Corruption, bribery, funding of illegal militias. Ashford was at the center of it. He was arrested 3 weeks ago. He's awaiting trial. He'll probably spend decades in prison. Eleanor felt a relief so intense she had to sit down. "So it's over. Truly over." "It's over," Bradford confirmed. "And what's more, William O'Connor used his influence to ensure the investigation was thorough. He's trying, Eleanor, to redeem himself. It doesn't erase the past, but it's a start." Her father visited regularly now. He never stayed long, still uncomfortable with the rusticity of Timber Creek. But he came. He brought gifts for Annie, always asking first if they were appropriate. He began hesitantly to build a relationship with the daughter he had rejected. It wasn't perfect. It probably never would be, but it was real. And an imperfect reality was better than a perfect fantasy. July. The summer heat covered the valley like a warm blanket. Eleanor, now 8 months pregnant, moved slowly, stopping often to rest. Annie, at 12 months, had learned to walk and ran everywhere, keeping everyone busy. "Pa, pa!" she would shout, running to Caleb whenever she saw him. He would pick her up, toss her in the air, making her laugh so loud that everyone smiled just hearing it. "That girl has you completely wrapped around her finger," Eleanor observed, smiling. "Completely," Caleb admitted without shame, "and I wouldn't change a thing." One August morning, Eleanor woke with familiar pains, calmer than the first time, but unmistakable. "Caleb," she shook him gently. "It's time." He woke instantly, all sleep vanishing. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." This time it was different. Grandmother Rain was already there, residing temporarily to be close. Zeke took care of Annie, taking her for a walk so she wouldn't hear her mother's cries. And Caleb stayed by Eleanor's side throughout the whole process. Without fear, just constant support. The labor lasted 6 hours, short compared to Annie's, but still intense. Eleanor pushed, screamed, squeezed Caleb's hand until she left marks. And then a cry, the strong, healthy cry of a baby, indignant at being expelled from the comfort of the womb. "A boy!" Grandmother Rain held him up triumphantly. "A strong, healthy boy, perfect." She cleaned him quickly, wrapped him, and placed him in Eleanor's arms. And Eleanor looked down at the crumpled face, the wet dark hair, the tiny flailing fists, and felt her love expand even further, if that were possible. "Hello, my love," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Caleb was crying openly without trying to hide it. He touched his son's head with reverence. "He's perfect." "Absolutely perfect." "What will we name him?" Eleanor asked. They had discussed names but never definitively decided. Caleb thought for a moment, looking at his son with infinite tenderness. "Henry Daniel Mackenzie," he said finally. "Henry for your uncle, who gave you refuge when you needed it most. Daniel for the man who gave you Annie and true love, however brief." He kissed Eleanor's forehead. "Both men who in their own way saved your life. It's only right that our son carry their names." "Henry Daniel," Eleanor repeated, smiling through tears. "It's perfect." Annie was brought back hours later, curious about all the noise. When she saw the small baby in her mother's arms, she tilted her head in confusion. "Baby," she pronounced carefully, a new and exciting word. "Yes, love. This is your brother, Henry." Eleanor lowered the baby for Annie to see better. "He'll need a strong big sister to protect him." "Can you do that?" Annie touched Henry's tiny hand with a curious finger. The baby instinctively grabbed it, small fingers wrapping around hers. "Mine," Annie declared with the seriousness of a small child. "My baby." Everyone laughed, their hearts so full they felt like they would burst. That night, when both children were finally asleep, Eleanor and Caleb sat on the porch under the stars. "We have a complete family now," Caleb said, marveling. "Two beautiful children, a house full of life, purpose, love. Would you say we're happy?" Eleanor asked, leaning against him. "I'd say we're blessed," he corrected. "Happiness is a temporary state, but a blessing is recognizing that, despite everything we've been through, everything we've lost, we found our way here together. We built this together." Eleanor looked at the mountains, dark silhouettes against a starry sky. Mountains that had witnessed her arrival, scared, pregnant, alone. Mountains that had seen her transformation, from fugitive to healer, from hidden to loved, from alone to part of a family. "I fled Boston thinking I was losing everything," she confessed. "But actually, I only lost what I should never have had. And I found everything I ever needed." "Both of us," Caleb agreed. "Both of us did." And there, under the silent protection of the ancient peaks, with two children sleeping inside, and a future as open as the infinite horizon, Eleanor finally felt complete peace. Not the peace of one who has never fought, but the peace of one who fought and won. The peace of one who knows the price of freedom, and chooses to pay it every day. The peace of one who found against all odds a home. September 1880. 2 years since Eleanor had arrived at Timber Creek. 3 years since she had discovered she was pregnant in Boston. It felt like a lifetime, and at the same time like it was yesterday. Annie was 16 months old now, a chatty, curious little girl determined to do everything herself. "Annie, do!" was her most common phrase. Eleanor saw her own traits in that stubbornness, but also Daniel's gentleness in how Annie cared for her younger brother. Henry was a month and a half old, a robust baby who slept well, ate well, and rarely cried. "A blessed baby," Grandmother Rain called him. "Born in peace, lives in peace." The house was full, not just of their immediate family, but of constant life. Eleanor's clinic saw dozens of people a week. The school in Timber Creek now had 23 students. The ranch cooperative was thriving, and the protection network had expanded. 3 small cabins had been built on the property, housing temporary families. Bradford had established a legal system, false but technically valid documents, carefully crafted stories, real protection for people who needed it. It was a risky operation, but it was a necessary one. One September afternoon, Eleanor was in the clinic treating a deep cut on a ranch hand's arm when Bradford arrived in a hurry. "Eleanor, I need to speak with you, urgently." She finished the final stitches, bandaged it carefully, and gave care instructions. Then she followed Bradford outside. "What happened?" "Federal investigators are coming. Not hostile, just investigating Continental Mining's operations. They want to interview Caleb as a witness about Morning Star's massacre. And by extension, they're going to investigate all of Timber Creek." He looked worried. "We have 3 families here who shouldn't be discovered. We need to move them. Today." Eleanor felt the old fear return, the fear of being discovered, of losing everything. "How much time do we have?" "They arrive tomorrow." "Damn it." It wasn't a word she used often, but the circumstance required it. "Where can we take the families?" "Running Wolf has offered to hide them on tribal territory for a few weeks. It's a risk, but less than being discovered here. They worked all night." Caleb and Zeke prepared a wagon, hiding the families under seemingly innocent supplies. Running Wolf and 2 warriors came as an escort. At 3 in the morning, the convoy departed silently. Eleanor watched them leave, holding Henry to her chest. Annie was asleep inside. Caleb stood beside her, tense but determined. "If we're discovered," she began. "We won't be." His voice was firm. "And if we are, we'll face it, together." The federal investigators arrived the next day at noon. 3 serious men with notebooks and endless questions. They inspected Timber Creek meticulously. They asked about finances, about operations, about people who had come and gone. Caleb testified about the massacre, every painful detail, every memory that tore pieces from his soul. Eleanor sat beside him, holding his hand, a silent support through the relived trauma. "Mr. Mackenzie, there are allegations that you have harbored fugitives," one investigator finally asked. "Can you comment?" "I have helped people," Caleb answered carefully. "People in need." "I never asked questions that didn't need to be answered. If helping one's neighbor is a crime, then I am guilty." "It's not a crime," the investigator admitted. "But depending on who you helped, it could complicate your testimony." "My testimony is the truth." Caleb held his gaze firmly. Morningstar was innocent. Benjamin was a child. The militia that Continental funded murdered them. That is a fact, no matter who I helped before or after. The investigators stayed for 3 days. They examined everything, but either they found no evidence of the protection operation or they chose to ignore it. On the 3rd day, the lead agent sought out Eleanor. "Mrs. Mackenzie," he said formally, "your husband's testimony will be crucial in the trial of Robert Ashford and the Continental executives. He is a brave man. He is a survivor," Eleanor corrected, "and a good man who refuses to stay silent while injustice happens." The investigator nodded thoughtfully. "I see you've built something special here, a community that takes care of its own. Rare these days." He looked directly at her. "If someone here, hypothetically, were helping people who need to escape unjust situations, well, hypothetically, I wouldn't consider that a crime. I'd consider it heroism." Eleanor understood. He knew, but he was choosing not to see. "Hypothetically, of course." He smiled briefly. "Of course. Take care, Mrs. Mackenzie, and keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more places like Timber Creek." When the investigators left, Eleanor collapsed in relief. The hidden families returned a week later. Life went back to normal, or what passed for normal at Timber Creek. October brought news from Boston via Mary. Robert Ashford had been sentenced to 20 years in prison. Continental Mining was dissolved. The executives faced criminal charges. Justice, though late, had finally prevailed. William O'Connor visited in November, bringing gifts that were too elaborate for small children, but clearly chosen with care. He sat with Annie for hours, reading stories in a voice Eleanor had forgotten could be so gentle. He held Henry for the first time, his hands trembling but tender. "You've built a better empire than I ever did," he told Eleanor before leaving. "An empire of love instead of fear, of chosen loyalty instead of obligation. I'm proud of you." I should have said it years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud. Words Eleanor had waited her whole life to hear, and now that they came, she found she no longer needed them. But they were still sweet to hear. Winter arrived again, Eleanor's 3rd winter in Colorado. But this time it wasn't a winter of survival. It was a winter of contentment. She would sit by the fireplace at night, Annie asleep in her lap, Henry in his cradle nearby, Caleb playing his flute softly. And she would think about all that had changed. The scared, pregnant girl who fled had become a strong woman building a life with purpose. The man broken by loss had become a father again, a devoted husband, a community leader. The bastard child had become a beloved daughter, with a family that would protect her against the whole world. The newborn baby had entered a world where he was already expected, loved, celebrated. It wasn't the life Eleanor had planned. It was better. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, stopping his playing. "About gratitude," she answered honestly. "For everything. For the mountains that hid me. For the land that fed me. For you who loved me when I didn't believe I was worthy of love. For the children who gave me a reason to be strong." Tears came, as they always did when the emotion became too much. "For a life I never imagined possible." Caleb pulled her closer, careful not to wake Annie. "I'm grateful too, that you had the courage to run, that you chose Timber Creek, that you eventually trusted me." He kissed the top of her head. "That you gave me a reason to live again. Do you think Morningstar would approve?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Of all this?" "I know she would," Caleb answered with certainty, "because I dreamt of her last night. First time since Henry was born. She was in her garden planting flowers. She looked at me and smiled. She said, 'You've done well, my love. You've honored my memory by living fully. Now go, keep living, keep loving. Take care of the flowers we planted together, not just the ones in the earth, but the ones of love.'" His voice grew hoarse. Then she disappeared. And I woke up knowing it was a final goodbye. Not from my heart, I'll always love her, but from the guilt, the pain, the survivor's burden. She set me completely free, to be fully yours. Eleanor turned to kiss him, a careful movement not to dislodge Annie. "I love you," she said simply. "More than words can say." "And I love you," he answered. "More than the mountains are high." More than the sky is vast, simply, completely, eternally. And in that simple house, under the protection of ancient peaks, with 2 children sleeping and a future shining like stars, love blossomed in its purest form, not perfect but real, not without scars but stronger because of them. Spring of 1881 arrived with a wild renewal. Annie was 2 now, a talkative, curious child determined to do everything herself. "Annie, do," was her most common phrase. Eleanor saw her own traits in that stubbornness, but also Daniel's gentleness in how Annie cared for her younger brother. Henry was 9 months old, a robust baby just beginning to crawl, putting everything in his mouth and laughing easily. He was a perfect copy of Caleb. Same dark hair, same grey eyes, same smile that transformed his entire face. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The clinic occupied Eleanor's mornings 3 days a week, teaching at the school the other 2. The rest of her time was dedicated to her family, her garden, and the endless work of keeping the ranch running. Caleb had testified at the Continental mining trial in Denver. It had been difficult, reliving the trauma publicly, facing aggressive defenders trying to discredit his testimony. But he had stood firm, and his testimony, combined with Bradford's evidence, had been crucial in the convictions. Timber Creek was thriving. The population had reached almost 200. There was a baker now, a blacksmith, even a small weekly newspaper. It wasn't a big city, but it was a real community, where everyone knew each other, cared for each other, and built something together. June brought an unexpected visitor. Eleanor was in the garden with the children, Annie helping plant, mostly making a mess with dirt, Henry sitting on a blanket chewing a blade of grass, when an elegant carriage arrived, far too elegant for Timber Creek. A woman got out, perhaps 40, in a pretty but not ostentatious dress, her kind face marked by concern. "Mrs. Mackenzie?" "Eleanor Mackenzie." Eleanor stood up slowly, wiping her dirty hands on her apron. "Yes, can I help you?" "I hope so." The woman approached hesitantly. "My name is Catherine Doyle. Was Daniel Doyle's sister-in-law." Time stopped. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. "Daniel, I know you knew him." "I know you were close." Catherine looked at Annie, who was playing obliviously. "And I suspect I know who this beautiful child's father is." Eleanor instinctively picked Annie up, protective. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't be afraid." Catherine held up her hands peacefully. "I haven't come to cause trouble. I came because Daniel's family asked me to. After he died, we found his journal. He mentioned you, how he loved you, how he dreamt of asking for your hand properly, as soon as he could offer the life you deserved." Tears filled her eyes. "He didn't know about the baby, did he?" "He died before he knew." Eleanor felt her knees weaken. She sat down heavily on the grass. "He died before he knew," she confirmed, her voice faint. "And I ran before anyone else could find out, because I was promised to another man, and the scandal would have destroyed everyone." Catherine sat beside her, a surprisingly graceful movement despite her elegant dress. "The Doyle family isn't rich, but we are proud. Daniel was the most brilliant doctor I knew, but he died without money, without recognition, only the love of the people he helped." She looked at Annie. "If this child is his, the family would like to know her. Not to take her, not to cause trouble, just to know her. To know that a part of Daniel lives on in the world." Eleanor looked at Annie, who, sensing her mother's tension, came over and climbed into her lap. "Ma, who?" "Someone who knew your birth father, love," Eleanor explained softly. She had never hidden the truth of her origins from Annie. She had always been honest. Simple, age-appropriate, but honest. "Pa there." Annie pointed to the barn where Caleb was working. "Your pa Caleb is there, yes. But you had another father, too, before. A father who loved you before he even knew you existed." Catherine was crying now. "She's his. I can see it. She has his smile. The same way of tilting her head." She wiped her eyes. "Mrs. Mackenzie, Eleanor, I haven't come to ask for anything. Just to bring this." She took an envelope from her purse. "Daniel's inheritance. It's not much. $200, some medical books, his stethoscope. But the family thought it should go to his daughter, to help her in life." Eleanor took the envelope with trembling hands. I didn't expect. I didn't know he left anything." "He left more than money." Catherine gently touched Annie's cheek. "He left a legacy of kindness, of service, of unconditional love. And it seems you are continuing that here." She looked around at the clinic, the school, the thriving ranch. "Daniel would have loved this. He would have loved you making a difference, just as he did." Caleb appeared then, alerted by some instinct that Eleanor needed him. He saw the strange woman, saw Eleanor's tension, and approached quickly. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his hand automatically going to Eleanor's shoulder. Caleb, this is Catherine Doyle. Was family to Daniel. Annie's biological father, Eleanor explained. Catherine, my husband, Caleb Mackenzie. Mr. Mackenzie. Catherine stood, extending her hand. I've heard about you. About how you took in Eleanor and raised Annie as your own. You are an admirable man. Caleb shook her hand firmly. Annie is my daughter. Blood or not, she is mine, he said without hostility, just firmness. But I honor the memory of the man who gave her life. For Eleanor to have loved him, he must have been a good man. He was the best of us, Catherine confirmed. And seeing what you've built here, seeing Annie happy and loved, I know he would be at peace. To know his daughter is with parents who love her deeply. It's all the family could wish for. They invited her for lunch. Catherine stayed for 2 hours, getting to know Annie, holding Henry, hearing about Timber Creek. She shared stories of Daniel, his childhood, his medical studies, his unwavering dedication to helping the poor. He used to say that medicine without compassion is just science, Catherine recounted, that doctors must heal not just bodies but spirits. It seems you've learned that, Eleanor. You probably taught him that as much as he taught you. When she left, she hugged Eleanor tightly. The family is in Boston if you ever want to visit. We don't expect it. But the door is open. Annie will always be welcome to meet her grandparents, uncles, cousins on the Doyle side. No pressure, no judgment, just love. She looked at Annie one last time. Take care, little one. You carry the name of a good man. Be proud of that. The carriage disappeared down the dusty road, leaving Eleanor emotionally exhausted. Are you okay? Caleb asked when they were alone. I don't know, Eleanor admitted. To see the past like that so suddenly, it makes everything real again. Daniel, Boston. Who I was before I came here. She looked at him. Does it bother you? Knowing Daniel's family wants to know Annie? No, Caleb said honestly. Annie has a right to know both sides of her story. Daniel was part of creating her, even without knowing. Honoring that doesn't diminish the love I have for her. He pulled Eleanor into a hug. Love has no limits. The more people who love Annie, the better. As long as they know that I am her father, I always will be. Eleanor cried against his chest, releasing the tension of the unexpected encounter. How are you so wise? How do you always know exactly what to say? Because I lost a family before, he said simply. And I learned that holding on too tight is the fastest way to lose. Holding gently with open hands, letting choices happen. That's true love. That night, Eleanor opened Catherine's envelope. Inside, $200 in carefully folded bills, 3 medical books with Daniel's notes in the margins. His handwriting so familiar it hurt to see, and his stethoscope, its metal worn from constant use, carrying stories of 1,000 heartbeats heard, 1,000 lives touched. She saved the money for Annie. She would start an educational fund. She placed the books in her clinic, where she could consult them, and she hung the stethoscope on the wall, a small memorial to the man she first loved, who gave her the gift of Annie, who died too soon but lived completely. Thank you, Daniel, she whispered to the silence. For loving me, for giving me Annie, for teaching me that kindness is strength, not weakness. I hope I'm making you proud. I hope that wherever you are, you know that your daughter is loved beyond measure. The wind blew through the open window, making the curtains dance. And maybe it was just the wind, or maybe it was an answer. The past never completely dies, but it doesn't have to haunt. It can instead illuminate, reminding us of where we came from, honoring those we loved, guiding who we become. The winter of 1882 was harsher than previous years. Snow began in November and didn't stop, piling up, freezing, turning Timber Creek into a white, silent world. Eleanor watched from the window, holding Henry, now 18 months old, while Annie, 3 years old, slept after an exhausting afternoon playing in the snow. There was beauty in that infinite white, but also isolation. The roads became impassable for weeks. Supplies dwindled, and with winter came sickness. First it was the flu, spreading from family to family like wildfire. Eleanor worked for days without sleep, preparing remedies taught by Grandmother Rain, visiting the sick, trying to prevent it from becoming an epidemic. Caleb helped, carrying supplies, taking her from house to house when the snow got too deep to walk. Zeke kept the ranch running single-handedly, taking on the work that normally required 3 men. You need to rest, Caleb insisted one night when Eleanor almost collapsed from exhaustion. You can't help anyone if you get sick, too. 5 more patients, she murmured, already half asleep on her feet. I promise I'll rest after. But the body has its limits. And Eleanor, pushing herself beyond any reasonable boundary, finally broke. She collapsed in the clinic, a sudden and violent fever taking hold. Caleb found her on the floor, unconscious, her body burning. He carried her home in absolute panic, shouting for Grandmother Rain. The elder came as fast as her old legs would allow, but when she examined Eleanor, her expression grew grave. Pneumonia, she declared, severe. She worked herself to exhaustion, was exposed to too many infections. Now her body is fighting. Will she be all right? Caleb asked, his voice broken with fear. Please tell me she'll be all right. I don't know, Grandmother Rain answered honestly. Over the next 3 nights, the fever will decide. It will either break or... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Annie and Henry were taken to a neighbor's house, protected from infection. Caleb refused to leave Eleanor's side. He sat by the bed, wiping the sweat from her face, murmuring words in Gaelic, begging her not to leave him. You can't leave, he whispered on the second day when the fever was at its worst. Not after everything. Not after we finally found peace. Eleanor, please fight for the children, for me, for the future we promised to build. Eleanor floated in a feverish haze, seeing Morningstar in her dreams, seeing Daniel, seeing the mother who had died years ago. They all seemed to be calling her, offering peace, promising an end to the pain. It was tempting, so tempting to let go. But then she heard a voice, small, scared, distant, but real. Ma, where's Ma? Annie, looking for her. Ma be back soon? Henry too, not understanding where his mother had gone. And Caleb, his voice broken like glass. Don't leave me. I can't lose you too. I don't know how to survive losing you. She fought then. She fought against the fever, against the infection, against her own will to surrender. She fought because she had reasons to live, 2 small ones and 1 too large to die for. On the 3rd night, the fever broke. Eleanor woke weak, confused, but conscious. Caleb? Her voice came out hoarse, barely audible. He was beside her in an instant, tears streaming down his face. You're back. He held her hand as if it were the only real thing in the world. Thank God you're back. The children? Safe, healthy, waiting for you. He kissed her hand repeatedly. You scared us all, Eleanor. Especially me. Sorry. She tried to smile, but even that was exhausting. Worked too hard. Yes, and when you recover, we're setting boundaries. You can't save everyone if you don't take care of yourself. It took weeks for Eleanor to regain her strength. Weeks during which Timber Creek showed the love it had for her, bringing food, caring for Annie and Henry, taking on the work of the clinic. You've given us so much, one mother said, bringing homemade soup. You saved my daughter from pneumonia last year. Let us repay you now. Family takes care of family, another added. And you are family. To all of us. When Eleanor was finally strong enough to get up, the first thing she did was hug her children. Annie threw herself at her with a force that almost knocked them both over. Ma's back! Ma, not go away again. Never again, love, Eleanor promised, crying. Mommy isn't going anywhere. Henry, too young to fully understand, just clung to her, refusing to let go. Caleb watched the family reunion, with an expression Eleanor couldn't quite decipher. Relief, certainly, but also something more. That night, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, he finally spoke. When you were sick, when I thought I was going to lose you, his voice failed. I realized I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to postpone dreams, thinking we have all the time in the world. Because we don't, no one does. Eleanor held his hand. What are you talking about? I'm saying I want to expand our family. Not biologically, not right now at least, but our chosen family. I want to formalize the adoption of children we help. Make Timber Creek an official sanctuary for those in need. Build not just a ranch, but a legacy. Something that will last beyond us. He looked at her intensely. But only if you want to. Only if you're ready. Eleanor felt her heart expand so much it almost hurt. I'm ready, she said without hesitation. Almost dying taught me that life is for living fully, not cautiously. If we can make a difference, we must. While we can. They began making plans that night. Expanding Timber Creek, building more homes, establishing a formal school, creating a larger cooperative. It wouldn't be easy, but important things never were. And Eleanor understood, as they discussed the future under the soft lamplight, that almost losing everything is sometimes necessary to fully appreciate what you have. Almost dying teaches you how to live. Almost losing love teaches you to love it better. Spring 1883, 5 years since Eleanor had fled Boston. 4 years since Annie was born. 3 years since she had married Caleb. 2 years since Henry had arrived. It seemed impossible that so much time had passed. It seemed impossible that everything had changed so completely. Eleanor was on the porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Annie, now 4, was beside her, trying to count the stars that still shone faintly in the brightening sky. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ma, too many. Infinite, Eleanor corrected gently. There are infinite stars, love. just as there are infinite possibilities. Henry, 2 years old, slept in Caleb's lap, who had just finished feeding the horses. He approached, kissing Eleanor softly before sitting down. "Beautiful morning," he observed. "Every morning here is beautiful." Eleanor leaned against him. "I still surprise myself sometimes. Waking up happy. Without fear. Without secrets. No more secrets," Caleb corrected with a smile. Timber Creek had grown exponentially. A population of nearly 500 now. An official school with 3 teachers, Eleanor among them. An expanded clinic with a visiting doctor once a month. A small church that served all denominations. Even an official post office. And at its center, the ranch, which was now a full cooperative, 30 families working together, sharing profits, making decisions collectively. It was a radical experiment. But it worked. Bradford had secured official territorial recognition for Timber Creek as a sanctuary town, a place where refugees could legally come to start over. It wasn't perfect protection, but it was a start. So over the years, they had passed through the ranch, 17 women fleeing violence, 23 natives displaced from stolen lands, 14 Chinese workers escaping slave-like contracts, 8 orphaned children. Some stayed. Others moved on, but all were helped. All were given a chance. It was a legacy, real, tangible, important. William O'Connor visited 3 times a year now. His relationship with Eleanor would never be what it could have been. The scars were too deep, but there was peace. There was mutual respect, and he loved his grandchildren with a fierceness that surprised everyone. Annie adored her grandfather, especially because he brought books on every visit. "Grandpa, books!" she would shout when she saw his carriage arriving. Henry was more cautious, preferring to stay close to Caleb. But gradually even he accepted William. The Doyle family had visited once 2 years earlier. It had been an emotional but good meeting. Annie's grandparents, on Daniel's side, meeting their granddaughter, sharing stories, crying together over the man they had all loved and lost too soon. Annie listened to stories about her first father with serious attention, processing it in the way children do, accepting without judgment, incorporating it into her understanding of who she was. "I have 2 daddies," she had proudly declared to her friends at school. "One who is in heaven taking care of the stars, and Pa who is here taking care of me. Twice lucky." Eleanor and Caleb had laughed and cried at the same time at that. On this particular spring morning, as the sun finally rose completely, painting the sky in impossible shades of pink and gold, a final but expected visitor arrived. Mary Callahan, now Mary Sullivan, she had married an Irish blacksmith 2 years earlier, stepped off a wagon with a baby in her arms. "Eleanor!" she shouted, waving. Eleanor ran to hug her, the 2 women laughing and crying as they always did at reunions. "Let me see." Eleanor took the baby, a robust 6-month-old boy named Patrick. "Oh, Mary, he's beautiful." "And loud," Mary laughed, just like his father. They spent the whole day together, catching up on their lives, sharing stories. Mary told her about Boston, how society still talked about the O'Connor scandal, how Robert Ashford was miserable in prison, how continental mining had completely collapsed. "You won," Mary said simply. "Against everything, against everyone, you won. I didn't win alone." Eleanor looked at Caleb playing with the children, at Zeke mending a fence, at the entire community working together. "I never could have done it alone." "But you had the courage to start," Mary insisted, "to run when everyone told you to stay, to choose yourself when society said you had no right. That's a victory, Eleanor. No matter what came after, that initial choice, that was your victory." That night, they all gathered, Eleanor, Caleb, Annie, Henry, Zeke, Grandmother Rain, Bradford, Mary, Running Wolf, William O'Connor, who had arrived as a surprise, and dozens of families from Timber Creek. It was a celebration, not of a specific occasion, but simply of life, of community, of having survived and thrived against impossible odds. They sat around a huge bonfire, children running, adults laughing, food being shared. And when the music started, Running Wolf on the flute, Zeke on the harmonica, Mary singing old Irish songs, Eleanor felt a fullness so complete she could barely breathe. Caleb pulled her up to dance, a simple, clumsy movement, but perfect in its sincerity. "Happy?" he asked, twirling her gently. "More than I ever imagined possible," she answered honestly. "When I fled Boston pregnant and terrified, I thought I was losing everything. But really, I was just heading towards this, towards you, towards our family, towards this life we've built together. No regrets?" Eleanor thought, about the wedding dress she abandoned, about the future in Boston she rejected, about the ease she could have had if she had just obeyed. "Not a single one," she said firmly. Every choice, every hardship, every moment of fear, they all led here. And here is exactly where I belong. Annie appeared, tugging at Eleanor's skirt. Pa, dance with me too. They took her between them, spinning together, laughing when Henry wanted to join in too. A family of 4 dancing under the stars, surrounded by a community they had chosen, and that had chosen them back. Later, much later, when the fire had died down to embers and the children were asleep, Eleanor and Caleb sat alone on the porch one last time. You know what's funny? Eleanor. In Boston, I was surrounded by hundreds of people but felt completely alone, here in the middle of practically nowhere, surrounded by empty mountains. I feel more connected than I ever imagined possible, because connection isn't about numbers, Caleb observed. It's about depth, about choice, about people who choose to truly see you and love what they see. Eleanor turned to him, memorizing his face, the lines around his eyes from laughing too much, the scar that would always be there, but no longer dominated his expression. The grey eyes that were once a storm but were now peace. You saved me, she said. I know you say I saved myself, but you saved me, Caleb. You gave me a safe place to land when I was falling. You gave me love when I thought I didn't deserve it. You gave me a family when the world said I shouldn't have one. And you gave me a reason to live again, he answered, his voice hoarse. You reminded me that surviving is not the same as living, that a heart can heal even when broken. That love doesn't end when we lose someone. It just transforms, grows, finds new paths. They kissed under the stars, a deep, slow kiss, unhurried. They had time. For the first time since they had met, they had all the time in the world. And when they separated, Eleanor looked at the mountains that had protected her, at the valley that had sheltered her, at the home they had built, at the clinic where she healed, at the school where she taught, at the lands where they helped others find their own refuges. This is what happiness looks like, she said in awe. Not perfection, not the absence of problems, but a life lived in truth, in love, in purpose. This is happiness. Caleb pulled her closer. And we're just getting started, he promised. There's so much more to do, to build, to love, so much more life to live. Then let's live it, Eleanor whispered. Completely, bravely, together. And there, in the mountains of Colorado, under an impossibly vast sky, the family they had chosen to be rested, not because the journey was over, but because the journey finally made sense. Eleanor O'Connor, who had fled Boston pregnant with nothing but fear and hope, had become Eleanor Mackenzie, healer, teacher, mother, wife, builder of refuges, savior of lost souls. Annie and Henry would grow up there, free from the chains society would try to put on them. They would grow up knowing that family is a choice, that love is action, that courage is doing the right thing even when it's hard. And Timber Creek would continue to be a beacon, not perfect but real, a place where broken people could come to heal, where the rejected could find acceptance, where the future was always brighter than the past, because the future was what they made of it. The mountains remained, eternal witnesses to it all, and in the valleys between them life went on, imperfect, beautiful, profoundly human, exactly as it should be.